IB Nation, welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. It is Friday, and y'all know what that means. It means it's time for our Friday free-for-all mailbag. That means today we're going to talk about what you all want to talk about. So you all send in your questions. We've already got 32 questions starred. I expect some more good ones to kind of jump in here as we go into this. And going to be a lively topic today. Obviously, a lot going on at Irish Breakdown. We've got several articles up front. Obviously on the website, irishbreakdown.com, I want you to check out. We dropped an intel piece yesterday on the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Hope to have another one on the defense either tonight or tomorrow morning. Hope to have that done. Just still waiting to hear back from a couple sources on some things with the defense. I've heard some good things about the defense so far. Obviously, that you're hope to hear good things this early in spring practice, and so far we have heard good things. Hear a lot of things about the battles in practice being back and forth. Offense maybe has the advantage one day, defense has the advantage the next, and honestly, that's where you want to be as a head coach. As an offensive coordinator, that's not where you want to be. As a defensive coordinator, it's not where you want to be. You want to win all the time, but as a head coach, you want to see your units going back and forth. And I think that's kind of what we've seen and so far from what I've heard. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow. For those of you who don't know, tomorrow we're going to have a special mailbag. I'm not sure what time it's going to get kicked off. It just depends on what time practice is over. And the reason that what I'm talking about is tomorrow we get access to Notre Dame's practice. It's going to start at 10:45, and we get access to the full practice. It's the only full practice we have access to. So whenever that practice is over, we'll have our show. It's probably going to be around 2:00 is probably when we'll get started with that. And we'll have a lot to say about just what we see from the Notre Dame football team during tomorrow's practice. So let's get to the mailbag, everybody. And you all did a great job with getting questions in. And I wanted to start. So it's kind of funny. There was a question that I assumed that we would get in the show. And we went through and I started like 30 questions, and Ryan started some. He had to leave. By the way, if you're someone who, like me, believes in the power of prayer, keep Ryan and his family in your prayers today. Ryan was getting ready to do the show, and there's just a family emergency came up, and so I had told him he had to go and deal with that. So that's why he's not going to be with us today. I'm hoping to have another guest join me or another co-host join me here soon. We shall see. But I really thought that the first topic was going to be about the 24/7 Sports article that was up yesterday. And a lot of people said they just assumed I was going to talk about it. Well, thing is, on Friday, I don't just talk about things. We talk about what you guys want to talk about. So we did have some people after I mentioned that brought that up. And so we should be able to dive into that. And I'll get into that here sort of at the beginning. Jay Wick 13 is going to get us started off. What about the 24/7 Sports thing with Kelly and Freeman? I want to be fair to the author or the person who said that. Let me find his name. I've never heard of this guy before, and I don't mean any disrespect by that. I tell you, I don't really read that stuff, but I got a ton of DMs yesterday and tweets and text messages from a lot of different people about something that a gentleman named Cooper Patagna said of 24/7 Sports, and they made like a little graphic out of it. And so I wanted to respond to it. But I wanted to hear it first. And so I went and listened to it. And the comment he basically made was twofold. Really, he made three comments that I felt needed to be addressed. One of them, he kind of addressed himself. The direct quote, and again, I want to be fair because I believe if you're going to respond to something somebody says, you take what they said and you take it in context and you don't try to turn it into something that it's not. And then this is what he said. He said, this is a direct quote, I don't think it's very different than how Brian Kelly recruited at Notre Dame. High-level, multi-year starters with limited upside. And then he made a comment about how they don't produce a lot of NFL players. He quickly walked that back. So I'm not going to hammer him for that, because he twice kind of walked it back and said, hey, I shouldn't have said that and the way that I did, which was smart, because I think Notre Dame is like tied for 9th in the last 10 years when it comes to producing NFL players. And of course, Notre Dame's got several guys that did get drafted that have started games in the NFL. And obviously you want to see that NFL production definitely take a jump, and it's not where it needs to be, but it's still good. To say that Notre Dame, who's tied for 9th in college football in producing NFL players, produce NFL players, is an inaccurate statement. But as I said, he immediately walked that back. So I'm not gonna hammer him for that. And then this is the second question he said, or the second thing he said. He said they're recruiting good players. They're going to be in the national spotlight, but the college football playoff, as in its current format, I don't think so. Everybody got all fired up about the comment about his recruiting stuff, which I'll address. But I thought the weirdest comment that he made was the whole thing about how Notre Dame in the current format isn't a playoff team. And the thing is you made two contradictory statements right there. Number one, you said they're recruiting exactly like Brian Kelly did. Yet Brian Kelly's team made 2 college football playoff appearances in the last 5 years in this format. So I don't understand how you can say, well, they're recruiting the same, but it's not possible for them to make college football playoff. And then his co-host was like, well, what about the expanded format? And he's like, well, that should help them a little bit. And I say, so if you want to argue that Notre Dame right now is not a national championship caliber team, that's debatable. I mean, that's clearly a fair thing to say, because Notre Dame hasn't beaten Ohio State. They haven't beaten Alabama. They haven't beaten Georgia. They've beat Clemson a couple times, and Clemson's been a national championship team. But the years that Clemson won national titles, Notre Dame did not beat them. Obviously, Clemson beat Notre Dame in the playoff in 2018. So they're not there yet. And I'd be sympathetic to that argument if you say, hey, look, in the current format, I don't think they can win a national championship unless they recruit better. I think most Notre Dame fans would somewhat agree with that statement. I don't necessarily agree with that statement. I think that there's been a couple coaching issues that have kept teams that I think are capable of competing for a championship, held them back. But let's talk about the recruiting aspect of it. And I thought this was the most kind of easy thing to do. And what I did was I simply used 24/7's own rankings to make the case, and to argue that that Notre Dame doesn't recruit as well, as is not recruiting any better now, is just blatantly false. And let's use the data to prove that. So here's a graph that I made for the article. And what this graph shows is obviously the recruiting class, the number of signees they signed, the number of total points. This is using the 247 Sports composite rankings, which I thought it would be smart to use 247 Sports, since the person who made this comment is from 247 Sports. And so then it's the average star ranking. So the star ranking of the players in the class, and then the number of 4 and 5 stars signed, and then the number of 3 stars signed. And you look at it, and Marcus Freeman basically, in my opinion, gets full credit for the 22 and 23 classes, in my opinion. If you go back and look at the 2022 class, for example, Marcus Freeman was the head coach on signing day, but he wasn't the head coach for the entire process. Very fair. But number one, the defense drove that class. It was ranked that high, with that many points because of the defensive class. And you got a stud like Billy Schrauth late. Well, we have reported on this multiple times. Billy Schrauth doesn't come to Notre Dame if Brian Kelly's still the head coach. Reason why is he wasn't coming if Jeff Quinn was the O-line coach, and Jeff Quinn was still going to be the O-line coach if Brian Kelly was the head coach. And so you got to look at 4 of the top 6 players in that class were a direct result of Marcus Freeman. How do I say that? Well, if you look at a lot of the top players in the class on the defensive side of the ball, Jalen Sneed, Junior Tuihalamaka, we've talked about him, Jaden Mickey, I believe Benjamin Morrison. Let me actually pull that one up, because I'm not 1,000% certain of that one. But we've gone through this. A lot of the top players in that defensive class didn't even have offers from Notre Dame when Marcus Freeman was hired. They were guys that when Marcus Freeman and his staff got hired, they then went out and recruited those guys and offered those guys and made them a priority. So it was a completely different situation. And so I think it's one of those things where, let's see here. So Benjamin Morrison also did not have an offer from Notre Dame. Benjamin Morrison did not get offered until February 10th of the 2021 season. So he also did not even have an offer until Marcus Freeman got hired, and him and his group then went out and offered those guys. So yes, Marcus Freeman deserves a ton of the credit for that. Then one of arguably your top offensive signee. He was my number 2 signee, but Billy Schroff was. We're directly a part of that as well. And that class finished with the second highest point total that Notre Dame's ever had, and the second highest per player average. This 2023 class, which I think is even better than last year's class, but that's a different conversation for a different day. It was 272.79 points, which is the third best that they've ever had, and 91.78 average, which is the third best they've ever had. So 2 of your 3 best recruiting classes, going all the way back to 2013, that's 14 recruiting classes, are a direct result of Marcus Freeman's influence at Notre Dame. But that's not even the biggest differentiator. I want you to focus on this last 2 lines at Notre Dame and look at the number of 4- and 5-star players signed compared to the number of 3-star players signed. And I think this shows the flaw in why looking at points for ranking is why it's there. The Notre Dame class in 2023, which a lot of people said isn't even a top 10 class. A lot of these services say that, had the same 4 to 5-star ratio to 3-star ratio as the 2013 class, which was a top 5 class. The difference is the point system given to 5-star players. That 2013 had more 5-star recruits that were ranked as 5-star recruits by 247. I think it's a little bit skewed. But still, even if you just take those numbers and take them at face value, the last 2 years, Notre Dame assigned 37 4- and 5-star players compared to just 8 3-star players. So I'm going to give you another stat to put this in context. In the 2 classes that Marcus Freeman is a direct result for, and you just saw somebody who would absolutely say that Marcus Freeman was a big reason for keeping Tobias Merriweather in the class, who was my number 1 offensive player in that class. 82% of the players that Notre Dame has signed in the last 2 years were 4- or 5-star recruits. I believe that puts them in the top 5. And only 8 of the 37 were 3-stars. If you look at the last 7 years of Brian Kelly's tenure, the last 7 years, Notre Dame signed 54% of their signees were 4- or 5-star players. 54%. 54%, 82%. How can you tell me that they haven't recruited any better when that's the giant difference in those numbers? So you can look at class rankings where they finish ranked here. I don't care about all that. I care about what is the value, what is the talent that you added to the class. And it's very clear from that standard right there that it's a much better class. Notre Dame signed 15 and 14 more 4- and 5-star recruits in last year's class than they signed 3-stars. In previous years, it was 1, 1, 10, 1, -1, -13, 5, and 10. You got to go back all the way to 2013, a decade ago, which was a class that was put together during a national championship game run, that Notre Dame had a class that came anywhere close to what this year's class was in regard to the high-level players. So I think it's really a bad argument to make. I don't think that Cooper – it's Cooper, right? I think that's what the guy's name was, Cooper. I don't think Cooper was making a statement that was meant to be slanderous. I don't think he was making a statement. I don't think he was trying to take a shot at Notre Dame. I don't think he was being unnecessarily unfair to Notre Dame. I think he just shows the problem that too many people that speak their minds about college football have about Notre Dame is you care more about perception than actual facts. And you hear what Josh Pate went through this the other day when he did his top 10, and I'm going to have an article out later today kind of breaking down my top 10. And the thing is Notre Dame's overrated. Notre Dame's overrated. Notre Dame's overrated. They don't do this, 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 and this. And my stance is you're going to be mad saying Notre Dame doesn't belong in the top 10. But in the last 5 years, Notre Dame ranks 5th in college football in wins. 5th. They rank tied for 9th in producing NFL players. They are one of, I think, Alabama. And Alabama is, I believe, Alabama and Clemson, I believe, are the only 2 teams in the last 5 years to have more playoff appearances than Notre Dame. That's it. because Ohio State's had 2, correct? Ohio State made the playoff in 19, and they made the playoff in 22, correct? No, I'm sorry. Ohio State also does. Ohio State made it 19, 20, and 22. So Ohio State, Bama, and Clemson are it. Georgia made the playoff in 17 and didn't make it again until 2022. Or 21. So Georgia's had same number as Notre Dame. Now they have more titles, which is why they rank ahead of Notre Dame. That's why Ohio State ranks ahead of Notre Dame. That's why Alabama ranks ahead of Notre Dame. So when you look at this and you break down the class and you break down Notre Dame's success and you break down the things that Notre Dame has done, it's a very clear argument that Notre Dame shouldn't even be in the conversation for whether or not they're a top 10 program. That should be a given. The question is, are they a top 5 program? But far too often, you have national people that speak on emotion. And they speak on things like, Notre Dame can't beat Bama. Notre Dame can't beat Georgia. And this was the argument that Josh Pate made is, but I'm not ranking them ahead of those teams. They can't beat Ohio State, but I'm not ranking them ahead of those teams. If you look at the last 5 years, Notre Dame is what? 2-2 against Clemson, right? That's a team in the top 5. They played Georgia in 2019. It was a 6-point game. That's it. Notre Dame had the ball with less than 2 minutes left in the game in Georgia territory with a chance to win the game. There's been 2 teams that have dominated Notre Dame. That's it. Bama and Ohio State. That's it. And so I just think when you respond on emotion, and I think he was giving an honest opinion. I don't think it was meant to be slanderous. I give him full benefit of the doubt in that regard. But this is just what happens is you get far too many people that speak on emotion and perception and don't actually use data and facts and don't research things. They just kind of go with the flow of what everybody else says. And they don't research things. And when I can take your own rankings and clearly show that your argument is flawed, that tells me you should probably be a little bit more open-minded to doing research about the sport you cover as opposed to just kind of going off of emotion. And so I think it was a pretty easy argument to take apart, to be honest with you. And I just think that's kind of where I wanted to come and address this particular topic, because I just felt it was too easy to pick apart. But I think it should also give Notre Dame fans I think some Notre Dame fans need to see this. And my man, Charlie Weiss's last belt loop, love you, man. But I think you need to look at this ranking when you're constantly complaining about how Notre Dame's not doing anything different, not doing anything better. Look at that. Don't tell me that Notre Dame's not up to their recruiting game in a big way since Marcus Freeman has took over. Here's the other flaw that I think too many Notre Dame fans fall victim to. You assume you'll sit there and say in one breath, well, the recruiting rankings are flawed, they're this, they're that, they're the other thing. Then in the next breath, you'll then say, well, Notre Dame's not recruiting well enough because of insert ranking. They don't recruit enough elite players. Based on what? Based on the recruiting rankings that you all say are so flawed. For example, look at Benjamin Morrison last year. Benjamin, 0 sites ranked him in the top 300. 0. I kept telling you all along, this is a dude. This is a top 100 player. This guy's got elite 5-star talent, right? 5-star upside, definite top 100 player. Well, you go back and look, and if you're gonna use the data that these services, you're gonna say, hey, well, look, they haven't signed a cornerback ranked in the top 100 since such and such. I'm like, okay, that's fine. You can say that, but I told you Benjamin Morrison was that dude, and he became that dude, right? SI All-American, ranked Tobias Merriweather as a top 50 player. I ranked him as a top 50 player. The recruiting services did not. So it may look to you like, well, they didn't recruit enough highly ranked guys here. But you're assuming, I think incorrectly, that the recruiting services are always right about these guys. Not just the Notre Dame guys, but that the guys they do rank as 5 stars are definite 5 stars. And I'll ask you this. Knowing what we know now, is there anyone that you would trade Benjamin Morrison for at cornerback in the 2022 class? Is there anybody? I wouldn't. So even though they didn't sign a highly ranked guy, is there anybody you'd trade for him? Not just what he did as a freshman, but just look at his God-given talent. Is there anybody you'd trade for? I don't think so. And that's the point that I've made. Well, you don't recruit enough premium positions. Well, look what they've done at quarterback since Marcus Freeman's been hired, right? Kenny Minchie, CJ Carr, Sam Hartman. That's up their game. Look what they've done at receiver since Marcus Freeman has been hired. Just signed the best, one of the 3 or 4 best receiver classes in the country, right? Comes a year after getting Tobias Merriweather, who I had as a top 50 recruit. And they've got a top 50 guy signed next year. O-line recruiting has been outstanding. Running back recruiting. You just signed one of the 5 best running backs in the country last year. Notre Dame has recruited cornerback, in my opinion, as well as any team in the country the last 2 years. So they've recruited linebacker the last 2 years as well as any team in the country. So I think sometimes we have to take a step back and say, we've got to make sure we're taking our Irish-colored glasses off and realize that not every kid that they recruit is a elite player. Not every kid that they recruit is underrated or disrespected or whatever else because he signed Notre Dame. Some kids are just solid players. Some kids are meant to be. And here's the other thing. Not every kid is being recruited to be a star. Some kids are meant to be, man, we need depth at this position, and that's a great depth kid. Well, why do you want to sign a depth kid? Because not everybody's going to stay for 4 years in this era of the open portal. So I need a guy that's going to be locked in even if he isn't a starter right away. So I need guys like that. So I think that you have to understand that every kid is recruited for different reasons. Does Notre Dame need to up its recruiting? Yes. But and I've said this before, and I think I'm putting out on the table right now. I'm putting my cards on the table right now. I think that the narrative about Notre Dame is going to be completely different going into next offseason than it is now when it comes to people's perception of what the talent is in this program. And I think you're going to see that, wow, this team is more athletic than I thought. This team is more dynamic than I thought. This team is bigger than I thought. And you're going to see what simply just adding legit quarterback play to your roster can do and how much that has held back Notre Dame in recent seasons. So I wanted to address that to begin with. And I think that we need to kind of be more thoughtful in how we look at this as Notre Dame fans. But I would also challenge the national media to say, maybe you also need to be more open-minded for this. Maybe you need to think, hey, do we have some regional bias in what we're doing? Here's something I would challenge the national media to do. Go look at the percentage of players from Florida, Georgia, Texas, and California that you have in your top 250 or top 247 or top 300. And then compare that to the number of players from those states that get drafted in the NFL. Now, what you're going to find is 2 things. Number one, that by and large, that Florida, Georgia, Texas, and California produce more NFL players than any other state in most years. But what you're also going to find is there's a pretty decent percentage of sometimes between 5 to 8 points every year between where the number of those players that are in the top 300s is higher by sometimes 5 to 8 points, percentage points higher than what is being produced in the NFL draft. It gets even greater when you compare all, and I've done this, when you compare where all pros are from over the course of a 5-year period. And there's even a greater, overvaluation of players from those big 4 states. Now, that doesn't mean those states aren't the best at producing football players. They are. The point is there's still too much of a flaw, in my opinion, of assuming that because this kid is from here, we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt because of whatever reason. And we're seeing far too often kids come from different states that you're not giving enough love to. Arizona being an example. Washington, to me, is producing a lot more talent than people give it credit for. There's a lot of states like that. Chicago is starting to get more love for what they're doing. The Carolinas are finally starting to get a little bit more love for the kind of talent they're producing. And the other part of it is maybe you should check yourselves a little bit on this thing about needing to see a guy in person in order to rank him high. Yes, in-person evaluations are good. I like them. I wish I could do them. There's some guys I want to be able to measure up, but you can also err on the side of putting too much onto it. And a perfect example is Benjamin Morrison wasn't really a 7-on-7 guy. He wasn't a camp guy. And so you all dinged him because of that, when if you would have spent just an hour, half an hour watching that kid's film, you would have realized what I knew and what this crowd knew, which is that's as good of a cornerback upside-wise as anybody in the country outside of maybe a guy or two at the top. Maybe. And you're seeing that. So I think that that's something I would challenge them to do, and I would challenge us Notre Dame fans to not believe that everything is a conspiracy. Not everything is they hate Notre Dame, they're this, they're that. Sometimes it's just, you know what? They just missed it like we miss it. I miss guys. I get guys wrong. Guys that I think are good that end up not being good. Guys that I don't think are that good that end up being really good. And that's what I wish that they would do more of. And I'm glad that I was able to address that topic a little bit today. So let's move on to the rest of our mailbag questions. We have a lot of guys here coming in, and I want to get to some of these questions here real quick. Let's start at the top with Nathan Milton. Nathan asks, in the last 10 years, who were the top 3 most athletically gifted players at Notre Dame? I think this one is, for me, relatively easy for me to get the top 2. I'm gonna have to think for a second about the third. The top 2 is easy. That's Jalen Smith and Will Fuller. I think when you look at the last 10 years, you're talking about going back to 2013. I think if you're going to talk just, again, pound for pound athleticism, Jalen Smith before the injury was a truly special athlete. I think that Will Fuller was clearly an explosive guy. I think if you're going to go pound for pound, athlete, most athletically gifted players, I'd probably put Chase Claypool in that conversation next. I think Chase is I know Miles tested better in some areas than Chase, but I think Chase was more showed it. Chase was still every bit the athlete that Miles Boykin was. I'm going to pull up their combine numbers because I know there was definitely some where Miles was definitely better than Chase was, and some that I believe Chase was a little bit better. So here was Miles' results from the NFL scouting combine, which he dominated. He ran a 4.42. And you compare that to Chase Claypool, who ran a 4.43, I believe. Oh, he actually ran a 4.42 as well. Miles had a slightly better 10-yard split at 1.5 flat. Chase is 1.52. Miles had a 43.5-inch vertical compared to 40.5 for Chase. Miles had an 11.8 broad jump compared to just 10.6 for Chase. And so, and then Chase didn't do. Last year was the whole thing where they didn't do a lot of the. That was a year where a lot of guys didn't do some of the other testing times and things along those lines. So I'm curious what I don't have Chase's stuff in front of me for what he did at the pro day, but I think when you look on the field, I think Chase was the more dynamic athlete on the field. So I'd probably go pound for pound Chase. You could, if we're talking last 10 years, you could make a case for CJ Procise, who was a dynamic athlete. Kawhi Russell was a dynamic athlete. There's Kyle Hamilton was a really dynamic athlete, although his speed wasn't as good as some others, but the other athletics numbers were really, really good with Kyle. So there's guys like that, I think, but for me, I'm going to go Chase. When you talk about a 6'5", 230-pound guy that could run a 4.42 and jump 40.5 inches, there was some really special stuff there with him. And I think he measured in at 6'4", 238 at the combine and ran a 4.42 and jumped 40.5 inches. That's really good. So that would be mine. Be curious what you guys, who you all had. So, I mean, obviously, I think we all assume Jalen was in that conversation. Who would you guys have? There's some young guys in the roster now that I'm curious to see kind of what they do as their careers continue. I'm more going off of guys that are more we've seen for the entirety of their careers. That's who I'm kind of going with. Joe Medina actually said Quentin Nelson. That's an interesting one. I don't know if Quentin was necessarily an elite athlete for his position, but you could then get into the case, which I'd be willing to bet, knowing Joe, that the argument he would make is for pound, you're talking about a 340-pound guy. Be an interesting one to consider, and be a very interesting one to consider. I feel that way a little bit about Aaron Banks. I think Aaron Banks, for his size, was a really good athlete and had really good testing numbers for a guy his size. Next question is from, we're going to go Quinn Kibler. Quinn says, what can we expect from Jabron Payne, Jadarian Price, and Jeremiah Love this year? What will that position look like outside of the workhorse guys? Well, right now, Quinn, it's still up in the air. It's still a question mark for me. I mean, we need to see if Jabron can get his groove back. That we had a little bit on Jabron in the intel piece that we dropped on the board yesterday, and he was a good back. I've said this before. I'll say it again. I said it the other day. I've said it when they got him. If he doesn't get hurt 2 years in a row, he's probably at Michigan or Ohio State or something like Penn State, some school like that, not Notre Dame, because they wouldn't have been able to flip him from Indiana. And so, I think he's a good back. If you're ever in a time in your life where you've got to rely on Jabron Payne as your lead running back, you're going to be fine. like especially if your offensive line is really good, you're going to be fine. Jabron Payne's a good running back. Jeremiah Love's a dynamic player, and Jadarian Price is the wild card, right? I think Jeremiah Love has a chance to be a star at Notre Dame. I think Jadarian Price did as well before the injury. It's hard for me to really say for sure what we're going to see from him just because we haven't seen him. He hasn't really been at the 2 practices we've seen. I'm going to hold off judgment on Jadarian until the fall. I'll say this. If Jadarian gets back to what he was before the Achilles injury, in my view, he might be the best running back on the roster. He's got that kind of ability. And by the way, a guy that nobody ranked in their top 200, by the way. I just want to remind people of that when we start assuming that the recruiting rankings are always right or spot on or evaluate Notre Dame players correctly. I believe highest 247 Sports had him at 166 on 3 to not have him in their top 300. ESPN had him at 227 and Rivals had him at 244. Good player. I think he should have been ranked higher. I thought he was a top 100, borderline top 100 back coming out of high school. We'll see. So I think it's for me a thing where it just depends on his health. But if Jabron's just a good player but not a great player again, with Jeremiah Love, with Jabron Payne, and then Jadarian as still a good player, I think your backfield is in great shape. Now it's about just building on it. Go get Kedron Young or Anthony Carey to go with Aeneas Williams. Go into the 2025 class, get one of the dudes from that class. And I think that this is what we talked about the other day. What Ryan and I talked about this the other day. The success on the field this year will have an impact on the 24 class, but the biggest impact it'll have is in 25. So if Notre Dame goes out there and puts up the kind of points that we expect them to put up, then I think that we're going to look at a situation and say they're going to start closing on some of these big-time guys that maybe right now are the difference between them being the number 9 ranked class and the number 4 ranked class. I think we'll see some of that stuff as well. Sean, you ready to go? All right. My man Sean Davis stepping up for me to help out today. Sean was kind enough to call an audible on his day to come join us today for the mailbag, Sean. So thank you for being with us today, man.
Pleasure's always be Driss, IB Nation.
You've actually only missed like 2 questions. I spent the first 25 minutes talking about that 247 Sports article and kind of stating my case for why it was. I gave the guy the benefit of the doubt, Sean. I don't think he was trying. I listened to the that segment of the podcast. I don't think he was trying to be inflammatory or disrespectful. Yeah. I think it was a flawed argument, and it's kind of bad when your own rankings don't back up what you're saying. You'd think you'd spend a little bit more time doing your due diligence on the statement you're making.
And it's kind of apples and oranges, correct? Like the first full class, in my opinion, with the Marcus Freeman effect is going to be the 2024 class. And even though that's coming off a 9-4 season, that's his season, right? So the 24 class and the 25 class would be the first 2 classes that are impacted by Marcus Freeman and Marcus Freeman alone. What he's done in Notre Dame and the program being his. I still think parts of that 23 class was suffering from the residue of Brian Kelly and his recruiting acts and the wide receiver coach situation and some other things that we talked about plenty of times. But 24, in my opinion, is Marcus Freeman's true first class. And then it's the first time his staff will have had a full season to recruit through the season and then after the season. So that's the way I look at that. So it's hard.
And you're not wrong, Sean, but here's my thing to build on your point. Even then, look at the numbers. Yeah. His first 2 classes are still better than what we had seen the previous decade. And that's kind of my point. And here's the other thing I did not do in my article because I didn't want to do that because it's not something that you can quantify. Mm-hmm. I didn't talk at all about how this recruiting staff is dealing with NIL at all. I didn't talk about that at all. Because I think that would be a slanted argument that would be flawed, from my standpoint. But I know a lot of people will say that has made it even harder for Marcus Freeman and his staff to recruit, which speaks even more volumes about the fact that they recruited even better than that one before. Let's get to some more questions here, and it's good timing for you, Sean, because we got a Charles Jagusah question coming up here to start. Nathan Milton says, would it be surprising to you if Charles Jagusah came in the fall and snags a starting guard spot?
His intentions Do I sound okay, Beatrice?
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay. His intentions are right along those lines. He's actually in great spirits. I talked to him about a week ago. And he came down and visited Notre Dame recently, and he wants to start. He plans to go ahead and compete. But we're hearing really good things about some of the interior guys right now on the first team.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there will be any rush for him to start. But if he comes out and he looks good and physically he should be okay from the minor procedure he had in the off season that unfortunately kept him from uh, defending his heavyweight championship in wrestling. And then I think, as Brian has reported, he missed being able to report early after that by like
Yeah.
2 days or something. So,
Well, because Sean, wasn't that the deal, right? He was not going to enroll early because he wanted to wrestle.
right.
Then he got hurt, and he's like, "Well, I can't wrestle now, so that's my whole reason for coming back. So I want to enroll early." But it was like 2 days past the deadline to
Yeah.
get it all done. Yeah,
To get it all done. So,
that's a bummer.
but he's in really good spirits. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, if it's not this weekend, he's coming back twice
Yeah.
in April. He's going to come back a weekend before, and then he'll be at the blue and gold game. So he's excited to get there. And I fully expect him to be one of the best interior offensive linemen that they have. Like, if they have, I'm not talking about just the best, let's say the best 5 linemen on the team, just regardless of position. I'm sure he could be in the midst of that sometime during fall camp. But I mean, you have your 2 tackles. Zeke Correll is your center. And that was just a matter of, once again, do you feel like, as a staff, even if he's one of those best 5, do you feel like you need to rush him at the start of the season, or can he find a way to get into some type of rotation down the line early in the season or in the middle of the season? So that's a very interesting thing. But I definitely think he has a chance to be one of the best 5 linemen in the offensive line room in the fall.
I don't think I think pure talent wise, I think that's probably what I expect to see.
Yeah.
I think we'll see. Will that mean he's ready to play? Maybe not.
Right.
Maybe because we heard this last year, Sean. People were like, "Man, this Billy Schrauth kid is so talented,"
We sure
but
did.
he wasn't ready to play yet.
Right.
He just, knowing the system, he'd missed all spring because of the injury, so he just wasn't ready to play yet. And by the time he was ready to play, it's like, okay, it's past redshirt time. Let's let's like not play him.
Yeah.
But it would surprise me a little bit, simply because I like the guard depth chart coming back with Billy Schrauth, with Andrew Kristofic, Ty Chan, Rocco Spindler, possibly Michael Carmody if you can put weight on. Maybe Ashton Craig. There's a lot of good options there. And Charles would have to pass up a lot of good options. And sometimes that has a lot to do with whether a guy is going to play or not as well. You look at the freshman receiver, Sean, in other years with Chancey Stuckey's a receivers coach, they're playing a ton. Whereas now they're fighting their butts off just to get to the number 5 spot.
Right.
Because of the fact that they have to beat out Tobias Merriweather, Deion Colsey, Caleb Smith, Jaden Thomas, Lorenzo Styles. And it's just like a guy like Lorenzo Styles is like, man, I hope I can. He's battling for the 5 spot right now. An honorable mention all ACC kid transfers in from Virginia Tech, and no one's talking about him. Because it's like he was the best guy on the team at Virginia Tech. He ain't that guy here. Now, he's important and he's a good player, and I'm glad he's here. But it just speaks volumes of the talent, and that's kind of where the situation Charles finds himself in. There's a lot of uncertainty at guard. There's not a lack of talent, in my opinion. But I also say that when you're that good, like Charles is, you're going to have a better shot at saying, hey, he's going to make some mistakes, but man.
Now, if they're, every offensive line, I'm sure, has their question marks, right? Because you lose. Michigan just lost their All-American center. Mm-hmm. So who's gonna be the center for them? If you're going to have question marks, at least you have your tackles and your center.
Right.
Now, the interior, for some reason, and correct me if I'm wrong, I would much rather let me say it like this, and then you can just go ahead and explain it better. I'm sure. I would much rather go into the season trying to figure out my guards, knowing that I have the talent and I might not just have the experience. Like, look, I have talented kids. We just don't know. They have to play. They have to get reps. I wouldn't want that in my tackles.
That experience is only at one guard spot. Andrew Kristofic has 8 career starts.
Absolutely. He started next to Joe Alt. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I mean, Sean, I would much rather have talent over experience without talent. That would always be what I'd want. And that's why I never bought Kane Madden's really experienced. I don't care how experienced he is. He's just not talented. That was the issue. Well, look what that experience did for him at Notre Dame. It allowed him to do his job from an assignment standpoint, but he couldn't do his job effectively from a talent standpoint.
Right.
At this level. So it also, because my mentality too, Sean, is I feel like I was a good football coach. So I didn't care if a kid knew how to run routes or whatever. I'll teach him how to do that. You know, that's what I'm getting paid to do. So give me a kid with talent, and if I believe in myself as a coach and I believe that I'm coaching for the right reasons and focusing on the right things, then I'm going to do that. Here's the one big caveat that I'll throw into this, Sean. If you're Joe Walton, Marcus Freeman, and Jared Parker, not Joe Walt, Joe Rudolph, you got to sit down with yourselves and have a real thorough conversation this summer and say, yes, I think Charles might be able to help us at guard, but we like where we're at guard. The reality is we might lose one or both of our tackles after the season. Do we want Charles to lose a year of work at tackle, knowing he might be battling for a starting job at tackle next year, because the depth at guard is actually better than the depth at tackle? Because behind the starters now, you've got Emil Wagner and Tosh Baker.
Yeah.
And then after that, you don't have a lot. You know, so is Charles going to be in a position where he can battle either Tosh or Emil for a starting job in 2024 tackle? Is that where you're looking? Then maybe you can't afford to have him spend a year at guard. That's the other conversation. Unless it's a no-brainer, he's flat out the best guy at that position.
Yeah.
I think that'd be the only exception. So it's not always as easy as like, oh yeah, he's super talented. But what if you don't view him? What if you view him as your future at right tackle? Then you may want to say, hey, he's going to need to, it's more valuable for him to be that guy next year than it is for him to work as a rotation guard, kind of like, let's say, like Robert Hainsey did in 2017. That's part of the conversation too. And it's not an easy answer. It's not, because you're like, because we need to focus on this team. That's the thing.
And you look at that. That's very interesting that you point that out, right? Because a lot of people, I know myself and Ryan, we talked about this with the NAP commitment, and a lot of people being down on that and saying, look, if Joe Rudolph says this kid is the goods, then give him one. You're still going after Caleb Brewer and Gerby Lambert. If this is his one that he's banking on, give it to him, right? Because you look at him and you say he might not play tackle, he might have to go inside. They might be dependent on that, and they might feel really good about where they sit with Gerby Lambert and Caleb Brewer,
Right,
and Charles Jagusah. Just to go to your point, they might feel like, okay, we have our 3 next tackles that are going to solidify the depth. We feel really good about those, and if we don't get those guys, we have got some backup.
Right.
So that might be the plan. They might.
And it could be too is Tosh and Emil. It's about how do Tosh and Emil play this year.
That's another thing. Now we know Emil is bull strong.
Yeah.
As he sits right now, what is it, about 280 something?
278, 279, somewhere around there. Yeah.
So they're trying to probably get him up at least to 290 something. But he's just as strong as anybody else on the offensive line as he currently sits.
Functional strength.
Yeah. So.
But can he play? And that's the thing. And we've heard good things about Tosh. So the point I'm making is this: it's not just about, okay, he has a shot to be one of our best guards. We've got to balance present and future. Yeah. And so that's kind of the way I look at it, in my opinion. It wouldn't be hard to do.
Yeah,
It wouldn't be hard to see him there, but I could also understand if the staff is like, we need to get him ready for tackle.
absolutely.
That would be there too. Let's get to the next question, Sean. Are you able to read these? If I start bringing them up, are you able to read them?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So because that'll make it easier for me to kind of be hunting through and finding more questions and starring them and all that kind of stuff. So let's rock and roll here with Quinn Kibler.
Quinn Kibler, also on running backs, do you expect to take another one in 2024 outside Aeneas Williams?
Yes, they're definitely now. Are they going to take a second running back no matter what? No, they're going to take a second running back if it's the right guy. And right now, there's a board that's deeper than two guys, but the top two guys on the board right now are Kedron Young out of Texas, who I absolutely love. Right now, he's a 215 kid with great feet, speed, big time player in my opinion. And then Anthony Carey, who's a running back from Florida, who I also think is a really good running back. Not a super dynamic player that's gonna blow people away but man, you just pop on the film, you're just like, man, this kid knows how to play football. This kid's a good football player. So I think both of those guys are really good football players. I think both of those guys are without question sort of that you're only going to take a second back if he's a guy, if he's like a really good player. And Kedron Young for sure is that guy. And I also personally think Anthony Carey is that guy, Sean. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on those two players.
No, both of those guys are absolutely fantastic. I tend to favor Kedron Young out of Texas. Just watching his film, he reminds me so much. He's bigger, but he reminds me so much the way he runs and how hard he runs of Quentin Griffin, that was back there at Oklahoma back in the day, number 22. Just it's real stout, fast. Runs faster than you might think he is based upon the way he runs and the style he runs. He runs inside, outside. I love that kid. Anthony Carey is also fantastic, but I really think the 24 class has a couple of guys that stand out. But for the most part, man, you can go around the country. This 24 class is pretty loaded at the running back position. I mean, you can get some pretty good running backs.
Yeah.
If you miss out on a guy and he decides to go somewhere else, I guess they call it the fallback. The fallback is not bad. And it's up to Dylan McCullough to decide whether or not they want to go ahead and take, because the running back depth, you expect to lose possibly two of your guys in the running back room going into next year. So picking up two will probably fit that bill. But you already, like you said, you talked about Jadarian Price possibly being the best of the bunch if he didn't injure himself. Jeremiah Love coming into the fold. Jabron Payne has been getting run due to injuries. In the spring, he's been getting a lot more reps. So they're going to have some guys that can go out there and produce. And I think the thing that we love at the running back position is that Notre Dame has always been able to find a way to get productive running backs at Notre Dame. But I wouldn't necessarily say Notre Dame has had superstar running backs.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
They haven't had a Bijan Robinson.
Yeah.
They haven't had a Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
They haven't had that kind of guy. You're absolutely right. And the only guy that they signed like that was Greg Bryant.
Yeah.
And some people thought he could maybe be that guy. I thought Greg was good. I didn't think he was that. I didn't think he was a top 100 guy. I thought he was more of a top 50 to 75 guy coming out. But yes, you're absolutely right, Sean. But they haven't had any problems with production.
No.
When they've had, Sear Wood, when his head was on straight, was a very good back. Obviously, Theo Riddick was a good, reliable back. You had Josh Adams was a big time producer. Dexter Williams, when his head was on straight, was a big time producer. Kyron was a really good producer with not running on a great offense, and we saw what we did last year. I think Kedron Young and Anthony Carey is a fun argument to debate as far as who you like better, because Kedron is so much like Audric and Anthony Carey is so much like Logan Diggs.
Yeah.
So we're back to the whole, team Audric, team Logan debate. You know what I mean?
That's a good point.
The fact of the matter is they're both really good backs.
Yeah.
Very good backs. And if they can add one of those guys with Aeneas Williams, who's more of an all-around kind of guy, you've got a heck of a 1-2 punch at running back. And you've now recruited running back at an exceptional level now for 4 years in a row. You have the Tyree in 2020, Diggs and Estime in 2021, Jadarian Price and Jabron Payne in 2022. So 5 years in a row. Jabron and Jadarian in 2022, Jeremiah Love in 2023. So you have 5 really strong classes in a row if you can land one of those two guys. And yet again, they don't have a Bijan Robinson, but who else hasn't had a guy like that? Like every national championship team, like in a long time.
Yeah.
I think you'd have to go back if I'm Travis Etienne in 18. But like I never thought Najee Harris was an elite back, in my opinion. I thought he was a really good back on a really great offense.
He was a great high school player.
Great high school player,
In
except when he
California, yeah.
faced against Tariq Bracy. Tariq outplayed him, by the
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
But he was a really good back. I never thought he
yeah.
was an elite back. He's not Derrick Henry, in my opinion. He's not Travis Etienne. 2021 Georgia, they were a running back by committee type of group. This past Georgia team, running back by committee.
Yeah.
So I think you'd have to go back to Derrick Henry, in my opinion. Like Alabama in 2017, they didn't have elite running backs that year. They had guys that were ranked high, but they weren't elite running backs, in my opinion. When you look like Damian Harris and Bo Scarborough, they weren't elite backs.
No.
And I think the NFL draft somewhat showed that. They were overrated because of who they committed to, in my opinion.
And I think to go to the point that we discussed in the previous question, hey, the running back position can be one of those positions that highlights the level of recruiting and how it's going up in comparison to what it was. Plenty of production, but now, Jadarian Price was different. If you didn't get a chance to see him in practice like we did, that wasn't a shot at you, Beatrice.
It's all good.
He was different. He was different. Jeremiah Love is different. They're just different athletes at that position. And so now Notre Dame is going out and identifying. Aeneas Williams is different. Look, I think what they're doing, you think about this, what they're doing spring with Chris Tyree, working him at both positions, is really great considering the running backs they have coming. Jeremiah Love in the fall and Aeneas Williams. Both guys that can do a lot in the run game and the passing game. So now your favorite personnel, your 21 personnel, can be on the field and be far more effective because they're learning how to use, I think, dealing with Chris Tyree, now they can learn how to use different ways the talented running backs that they have coming down the pipeline that are far more explosive than what we've possibly seen in Notre Dame in previous years. Championship game, and Notre Dame has the ball on opponent's 20-yard line with 5 seconds on the clock. What 11 players do you want on the field, and what play are you calling?
Well, I'm not telling you what play I'm calling because there's, as I've said a million times, there just depends on what's the weather conditions, what stadium we're on, what the field conditions, what defense am I facing, a 3-3-5, am I facing a 4-2-5, whatever the case may be. So specific play call. If I got the ball in the opponent's 20-yard line, 5 seconds on the clock, what 11 players I want on the field? Am I down 3? Am I down 2? Am I down 6? I mean, that's another part of it, right? So I don't know. Do I need a touchdown? So that's kind of all part of it. So let's just assume with this question, Sean, that you need a touchdown.
Okay.
Because otherwise it's like I'm doing something safe to set up the game-winning field goal, right? So let's assume you need a touchdown. I'm going 11 personnel. I'm going to have Deion Colsey on one side, Tobias Merriweather on another side, probably Jaden Thomas in the middle, and my tight end. Because what I want is if I need a touchdown and I got one play, basically 20-yard line, let's say there's no timeouts, and whoever my running back is going to be whoever my best pass blocker is. Like that's who I'm going to have there. Because I got to take a shot. I mean, I got to score. Now, what you could also say is I need to get, if there's 5 seconds left, here's the other, do you run a quick outcut to get out of bounds and maybe get a little closer to where you can run a better play? That's something that you'd consider too. Again, there's a lot of stuff I don't know about the situation. What's the down and distance? How many timeouts do I have left? There's just a lot of things like that. If I have a timeout left, Sean, I could run a quick slant. If they're going to play off, I could run a quick slant. Hey, catch the ball and get down. Get what you get and get down.
Right.
And then we're calling timeout, and then we've got another play to run. So it's just a lot of factors I need to know as far as specifically what play that I would call. But what I do know is I'm going to have my big guys because I think you're not quite close enough to where a make you miss guy is going to really help you. You need a guy that can catch the ball at or near the goal line. And I think Jaden, Tobias, and Dion are my best three, and Mitchell Evans or Holden Stace, whoever my best red zone weapon is a tight end. Those are the four guys that give me the best shot of saying, hey, we're going to run some kind of play, whether it's, throwing up a go route, or I may go trips and use like Tobias to kind of run a backline throw to see if we can get him open. I may do like a little half roll, maybe send Tobias, who'd be my outside guy, like on some sort of like a wide, an over route backside, maybe a throwback type of situation, and then run my other two guys on sort of like a wide fade, like a wheel type of concept, something like that. And then maybe have Jaden Thomas run some sort of delay under type of thing where maybe I can sneak one, but I'm going to get somebody on two parts of the end zone and kind of have the quarterback read, where's the defense going? If the defense is primarily going to Dion, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw the ball up to the backside and throw it high, because if they're in chase mode on Tobias, I'm going to throw it up and give him a chance to go up and get it. If they're just playing straight up, then I may say, hey, throw it up near the sideline to Dion, give him a shot to where only he can catch it. Those are the two, some type of concept like that, most likely if I'm facing a team that plays zone, I'm going to handle that differently. And that's why I say there's a lot of what ifs that I'd need to know that I would have a better feel of based on the week of prep and study of that team to help me better answer that question. But assuming that they're in man, a lot of teams like to play man in the red zone. Some kind of concept like that would probably be where I would go.
I was liking what you were saying, because I was thinking Jaden Thomas, one of his strengths, I would probably go trips to the right, Tobias backside, and based upon man or zone, he can either run just a fade, or he can fake like he's coming across on a drag and then take it to the corner that way. But I would also do the little short rollout to the right and have Jaden Thomas, the inside receiver, run to the corner, maybe a dig under him from the outside, and then have Tobias in the mirror receiver, someone else, Deion Cozy, running the back of the end zone on a dig or something like that, or cross, just to give you options. And then your receivers have the options based upon whether or not they're being played man. One of those receivers can just go to the goal line and sit and turn around if they see zone. It's a lot of different things you can do, but we're pretty much along the same line. In that position, you definitely have to move your quarterback, because I would expect from most defensive coordinators, I would expect some pressure.
Yeah.
In that situation. I would expect some pressure in that situation. So let's see.
Got one here, Sean, from USM.
Yeah, I was about to pull it up.
No, that's all good. I'll pull them up and you answer and you read them. So we got one from USMA 87.
Hey, thank you, USMA 87. What part of practice are you most looking forward to seeing tomorrow? Okay. What group do you want to see the most?
I want to see the lines. I mean, we've seen the athletes running around. I want to see the lines. I want to see who looks good, who's banging, who's competing, which D linemen are stepping up. I'm really looking forward to seeing Jason Onye. I've heard a lot of great things about him. I thought he looked good in drills the other day.
Yep.
Looking forward to seeing him in a full practice. I have not seen the entire team play in a full practice so far. So I'm looking forward to seeing that on Saturday and seeing what they have to bring to the table. So that's for, I mean, you watch all of it, right? I want to see how the receivers and all that, but I'm really looking forward to seeing the front seven on defense and the offensive line. And just because I've seen zero run game this spring so far. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to seeing that battle in a full practice.
Look, people don't understand how huge, and this is something that we saw like bits and pieces of Jason Onye coming last year. And we would mention him every now and then. When Prince Collie says he's unblockable, no one can block him, if that is confirmed, you don't know how big that is for that defensive line. Because now you're talking about a rotation of 4 guys on the inside with him, Riley Mills, Gabriel Rubio, and Howard Cross that you go into the season feeling very comfortable with. Very comfortable with. Now, that makes you feel a lot better, because defensive line is a big question for a lot of people. And if we come back tomorrow and during the practice report, we sit here and say, yeah, what we've been hearing is indeed fact. And hopefully he can stay healthy and make it to the season. But for me, Jason Onye is like the same echoes you've been hearing about Nolan Ziegler. It's the
Mhm.
same echoes you've been hearing about Josh Burnham. Like
Right.
we've said it. These guys are coming. These guys are coming. They're almost there. And now to hear from people inside the program that the consistency is starting to be there on a day in, day out basis is absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Can you imagine Jason Onye and Tyson Ford popping
Oh,
and then following that up with what we hope is going to be a tremendous class in the 24 class on the defensive line? Now you're talking about turning the tide
and
and
there's
what
high
Notre
ceilings
Dame.
in last year's class too. I mean,
Yes,
low floor, high
yes,
ceiling guys.
yeah.
Sean, John A1 has the play that he thinks that they should run.
Okay,
All
let's
right, see
go.
if you get this reference. He said fake 23 blast with a backside Georgia reverse. Do you remember what that's from? Remember the Titans.
Remember the Titans.
Very well done, John A1.
Now,
Very well done.
Is Preach still going to be able to run that?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think that would work very
Oh man.
Really well done. Really well done. Coach Bent 547 has a question.
All right, Coach Ben 574, thank you for your question. Who was each of your picks for breakout freshmen this year, a la Ben Morrison? Feel free to each choose with brain and heart. They are different people. I thank you for that concession on the back end because that's definitely something that I would probably need in this conversation. You want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'll take a shot at that.
Okay.
Offensively, Sean, I'm going to take one on each side of the ball. Offensively, it's going to be a wide receiver, in my opinion. Which one it'll be, I don't know. We'll find out. I mean, they're all doing some good things early. I think you're going to see a freshman crack the rotation, whether it's because they just play well, someone gets
Yeah.
injured, someone
Yeah.
transfers after the spring. Something's going to happen where one of those guys is going to be counted on. I think he's going to really show himself because unlike what we saw last year, this guy's walking a situation where there's zero pressure on him
Yeah.
because of how well the other guys are, and because they're going to be running the football as well as I think they're going to be running the football. So you can pick one. You can pick Rico. You can pick Jaden. You can pick Braylon. You can pick anyone that you want. I think that would be my pick for them. And then on defense, I'm sticking at the same position, man. I'm staying a corner. I'm going with your guy Christian Gray. I
Yeah.
think that he's going to be a kid that's going to help out on special teams. He's a guy that's going to help out, maybe earn a spot in the nickel.
Yeah.
And I think Christian's going to have a shot to play. And I know that Notre Dame wants to be able to rotate their corners a little more just to keep Cam and Benjamin from just having to play too many reps. And especially you're not taking them off the field against Ohio State, but,
Right.
you can work them in there in a lot of those other games. The other guy that don't be shocked if one of the two freshman linebackers is balling out this year, at the very least on special teams. What I don't know if we're going to see this year, Sean, just from an opportunity standpoint, I don't know if there's a freshman that's going to have the opportunity to start the way that Benjamin did, just because of how loaded they are in some of the other positions. So, for example, like Drake Bowen and Jaden Alsbury, I'll have an update on them in the defensive intel piece when we finally put it up, because I did have some stuff on them. As good as they are, they've got to beat out Nolan Ziegler and Jalen Sneed and JD Bertrand and Jack Kaiser. It's a little not as easy as beating out Clarence Lewis, with all due respect. Same thing a wide receiver. To start, those guys have got to beat out Tobias Merriweather, Deion Colsey, Jaden Thomas, Lorenzo Stiles, and Caleb Smith.
Yeah.
So it's just not going to be as easy this year as it was in past years. Jeremiah Love, another example. In past years, Jeremiah Love is playing a ton as a freshman, but now he's got to beat out Audric Estime, Logan Diggs, Jadarian Price, Jabron Payne, and possibly Chris Tyree. So I just don't know if there's a freshman that's going to have that same opportunity, because Benjamin was a star last year for two reasons. One, very talented, and two, the opportunity was there because the cornerback opposite Cam Hart just was simply not as good as what you need at that position.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I'm at on that one. So We'll see.
I'm going to go and cast my die. I'm going to bring up one of the receivers, and I just really, man, look, from just watching him move, it comes down. Jaden Greathouse is he's just a dude, man. He's just a dude. They've all made really good plays and really good catches. Like you've seen highlights from Braylon, Rico, Kenny Minchie throw into them. Like you've seen it from the freshman class. It's a very talented class. I'm going to say that Jaden Greathouse is that guy. And with my heart, I would of course pick my guy Christian Gray, but I'm going to go ahead since you chose Christian, and I'm going to say Devin Houston. I'm going to say Devin Houston at 280. And by the time they get to fall, I expect him to be a little bit heavier. But I think Devin Houston is just athletic enough and quick enough and just strong enough to be able to hold up and be able to give some good reps as a freshman. And I'm not break out in the point of being an All-American, but break out in the point to where 10, 15 snaps and he's making plays. He's being disruptive on the defensive line and he flashes, during games. I'll go ahead and say take Devin Houston.
I'd feel a lot better about that one if he wasn't hurt this spring.
Yeah, that's the thing
that'd be my only thing. All right, Sean, here we go. We got another one.
Yeah, let's get it. How do you guys feel about running more air raid passing concepts? Not surprised given Parker, but do you think we will have the personnel to do it? Thank you, Coach Mint 574.
So for me, Sean, when you look at it, everybody runs some type of air raid concepts just about. And I think that because it's a comment of one of the tight ends said that they're running some air raid concepts. And that gets way overblown, right? I mean, it's like there's teams that aren't West Coast offenses that run some West Coast concepts. Air raid in its traditional sense has to do with an overarching philosophy of how you're going to play. Notre Dame will look nothing like an air raid team this year. They're just not going to. There will be certain concepts or ISO concepts, certain things that are prominent in the air raid family, but I hate using that term because I think people take that as they're going to be doing something different. And they're not. It's going to be a pro style team that has certain pass concepts that fit what they do that you see a lot of air raid teams doing. The air raid has become the modern West Coast in a lot of ways, Sean, in that
that's true.
There's a few true believers in it, right? But like what Lincoln Riley does in the air raid looks nothing like what Mike Leach does in the air raid, and may he rest in peace. It looks nothing like what Hal Mummy, the supposed architect, originator of the air raid, did. It's certain principles that they still stick to, certain philosophies they still stick to, getting guys the ball in space, isolations, keeping things simple. You only have receivers play left and right. They only play one position. That was the big knock on. Remember, was it the kid that came out of Baylor a couple years ago, Corey Coleman, right?
Corey Coleman, yeah.
This kid only ran 4 routes. I remember breaking down Will Fuller's film that year and like, Will Fuller ran like 23 unique routes that season. Corey Coleman ran like 4 or 5. And he only played on one. I mean, he literally they did not know if he could get into a left side of the receiver stance or like right or whichever side he was, because he just never went to that side. Those are not things they're going to be doing. That's really more air raid. There be some concepts, yeah, but they're not necessarily going to look a whole lot different than what they do. It's just a little wrinkle here and there. Yeah. And that's really what it boils down to. So let's get to the next one. Actually, this is for Ryan. Ryan will not be making any spring practice visits, but Ryan, as of right now, the plan is that Ryan will be coming for the Blue Gold game. So hopefully that's able to stay. This is a funny one, Sean.
Jack Swarbrick decides to name himself the new head football coach, hires BK as OC to run triple option and BBG Brown. They go to SDC. What is the title of the first IB show after the announcement?
It'll be short and sweet, Sean. I'm out. That's what the new show will be called. I'm out. That's yep.
Hey, yep. You know what? I wouldn't, I usually like to mess with you when certain things happen. I would respect the amount of angst that you would be in surrounding this situation here.
I'd give you one of these. I'd give you one of these. I'm gonna start covering Illinois, Sean. That's what I would do.
Hey,
So a
Brett
Illini
Bielema has a
breakdown,
line.
baby. A Illini breakdown. Got to do a rebranding.
Oh man.
Yeah, that would not go well. That would not go well. Thank you. It's got a super chat from K Grant. Thank you, K Grant, very, very much, man.
Thank you, Kate Grant. I will give another if this show starts out with I do this for a living comment. I'm doing my best Twitter Ryan today. Hashtag 247 Cooper P.
I don't get that reference. Did he say something like that?
Yeah, you know, Ryan is always like on Twitter, hashtagging, like letting people know, like, scouting is what I do, watching film is what I do. So,
Gotcha.
that's a Ryan. Yeah, that's a Ryan thing on Twitter.
Gotcha.
When you guys follow him on Twitter, he
I was
goes
curious
back and forth.
what the hashtag 247 Cooper P part of that meant. So I don't follow him on Twitter, so I don't know what that's a reference to. So sorry about that. Let's get to another one here, but we do appreciate the so somebody just sent me something. Apparently, yeah, so somebody just sent me what he said for a response, and the person he responded to has zero credibility in my eyes, so I'm going with Cooper on that one. So hard, sorry y'all, but a freaking he responded to an absolute clown who steals people's information. So screw that guy. So I don't really care what he has to say, but I see what he said. Anyway, all right, let's get to the next one here, Sean. Oh, sorry, here we go.
All right, when was the last time the depth of the talent at wide receiver was this deep at Notre Dame? It feels like Notre Dame has 8 wide receivers who can start for Power 5 teams. Am I wrong? How did Coach Stuckey do it with only 1 transfer?
Well, I'd say probably the closest we saw was 2018, but they just never used those guys. I mean, you had Chase Claypool, you had Miles Boykin, you had Chris Fink. That was the freshman year. You had Kevin Austin, you had Braden Lindsey, Lawrence Keys, Micah Jones, Joe Wilkins is probably the closest that they've been to that. Michael Young was on that team, but this group is more talent than that group. It's depth wise. I mean, I liked Lawrence Keys, I liked Micah Jones, I like those guys, but they are not as good as the freshman class now. How did he get it with only 1 transfer? Well, number one, you got to give a lot of credit to Chip Long for recruiting the Lorenzo Styles and Deion Colsey, and you've got to give credit to Tommy Reese and Del Alexander for recruiting Tobias Merriweather, and then Coach Freeman keeping it. So you started with a good baseline, and where you really got to give credit to is Notre Dame, because that's why Tobias is at Notre Dame. It's not because he necessarily was like, oh my God, my dream in the life is to play for Del Alexander or Tommy Reese. It's like Notre Dame sells itself in a lot of ways. And Tobias is a young man, if you know his family at all, is a young man who is not a sports is the only thing that matters in my life type of player. It's important, and it should be important, because this is a chance for him he has the chance to be a professional athlete.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, but there's a lot more to it. If you're going to be a professional athlete and if you got this type of education and life experience, you're going to be a lot more successful with how to handle what comes with that. And then maybe if you're able to play 5 to 8 years in the NFL, you can take that money, use your degree that you got from Notre Dame, and turn it into 10 times that, whatever the case may be. And so I think that helped as well. Coach Freeman getting the head job helped. I think there would have been a lot more departures from that 22 class beyond just like the Devin Moore and a couple of those guys, CJ Williams. There'd have been a lot more departures from that class if they wouldn't have hired Marcus Freeman, in my opinion, especially from the defensive class. So I think, and then he hit a home run his first year. I mean, that's the thing, is he hit an absolute grand slam home run his first year. So you talk about the 4 incoming freshmen plus the transfer. All of a sudden, your 4-man returning class. Because here's the thing, that 1 year saved it. I mean, look, if Notre Dame's receiving options core this year, Sean, was a 4-man rotation of Tobias, Deion, Lorenzo, and Jaden Thomas, that's a pretty good 4-man group. The problem is, without the recruits that Stuckey brought in, that's all you'd have. Matt Salerno is your next guy, and then it's walk-ons after that. So, I mean, completely fix the depth chart, but there's good players already there. They just needed to be – this is the problem, Sean. They needed to be coached. That was always what was lacking. those guys weren't getting coached. Now they are. And so you're in a much better place. Much better place. Got another one from John A1.
I'm sorry.
It's all good.
I just threw out that 13, 14. That group of wide receivers was pretty. It's pretty
13
good
would
too.
have been, you had Torrey, you had TJ, DeVaris, Chris Brown. That's right. That was Fuller and Robinson
Fuller
and
and
Torrey's
Robinson.
freshman year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then that 14 receiving core was pretty good too. Yeah. Because that's when Torrey actually could play. Torrey was hurt in 2013. He couldn't play because of that.
Right.
He broke his leg. Yeah, that's a pretty good group. I mean, and look, there were some. I mean, in 2016, Sean, you had Equanimous, Torrey Hunter, Kevin Stepherson, CJ Sanders, Chris Fink, Miles Boykin, Chase Claypool. So like you had years where they were deep.
They were deep, yeah.
It just they didn't. This was always my beef.
Didn't utilize.
They didn't use them. That was the beef. Not that they didn't have talent. Same thing with quarterback. Oh, they're recruiting quarterback. Look, they've always been able to recruit quarterbacks. They just didn't develop them. That was the problem. Well, now I have a lot more faith in the staff now to develop those guys at certain positions than I did before.
Yeah.
And that's the key. That's the
John
key.
A1 again. Upon Marcus Freeman taking the job, he talked about a 1A, 1 and 1A depth chart. If Merriweather, Thomas, and Cozy are the ones who was in the 1A group.
Who's in the 1A group? So, I mean, Caleb Smith is going to be there. Lorenzo's going to be there. And then after that, it's Matt Salerno or one of the freshmen, depending on it's going to really come down to where you play Lorenzo. Because if you play Lorenzo in the boundary, then to me, I'd say probably Braylon James would be that next guy, either one of the two outside spots. If Lorenzo's going to play outside, I meant to say if Lorenzo's going to play the slot. I think I might have said Lorenzo outside. If Lorenzo's in the slot, then one of the, Braylon James or, will be one of those two outside spots. If you're going to play Lorenzo outside, then it's Jaden Greathouse and Chris Tyree. Now, I left Chris Tyree out of that because Chris Tyree, to me, is on his own little special depth chart, where he's just sort of that AP. So how teams will do that. Remember how Virginia did that in 2021? They listed like 13 starters because they had like their 11 starters, and then they had like two guys listed at like K-Tawan Thompson was listed at like FB, like football player, FBP, the list was football player. To me, I'd have my 11 starters, and then I'd have my AP, and it'd be like Chris Tyree, my 1, and Jeremiah Love, my 2, would be my depth chart for that. So that would be mine, Sean. What would yours look any different?
No, it would definitely be Lorenzo, Caleb Smith, and Salerno probably at the beginning of the season with the freshman coming on, taking reps away.
All right, let's get to got it here from God Country, Notre Dame, and Barbecue. Absolutely one of my favorite names.
That's a pretty good combination.
Yeah.
Hypothetical, if I had a time machine and guaranteed you that Hartman went in the first round in the NFL draft next year, how would Indy's season end? Would it change if Hartman went in top 10?
If you could tell me that Sam Hartman was going to be a first-round NFL draft pick next year, then we're talking about Notre Dame winning the national championship, or at least playing for it. Like, there's no doubt in my mind. It means he went out and had an absolute monster 4,000 plus 40 touchdown season. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what that means to me. And so, yeah, because like to me, that's the kind of, he'd have to have that type of monster season in order to be a first round pick. I just don't see him being that guy for Notre Dame, in my opinion.
Certainly not from a talent standpoint.
Right.
That's not a talent standpoint.
Doesn't have the big arm that the first round picks have. He doesn't have the size that they have, but he's a really good quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
But my whole thing is people can say what they want about his talent, but I'll just say this. If Christian Ponder can be a first-round NFL draft pick, then Sam Hartman can be a first-round NFL draft pick, okay? And so if Mitch Trubisky can go number 2, then Sam Hartman can be a first-round NFL draft pick. So I say that a little bit in jest. But he'd have to just have an absolute insane season, Sean. And if he has that, Notre Dame's not losing to anyone in my opinion. Because the other thing, too, about him being a first-round pick is it's because he went toe-to-toe with Caleb Williams and out-dueled him. He went toe-to-toe with Cade Klubnik. He went toe-to-toe with, Kyle McCord or whoever else are going to play. He went toe-to-toe with whoever he's going to face in the postseason. He went toe-to-toe with, Bama, whoever they're going to be, or Georgia or whoever else, and outplayed them. I mean, that's what it would take for him to be a first-round pick.
I think the big thing would be Notre Dame will go into the playoffs with the best quarterback in their matchup. That hasn't been the case. For the first time, Notre Dame can go into a playoff matchup with the best quarterback on the field.
Yeah.
That is going to be worth anything.
Yeah.
If indeed he does go on the run, the Heisman run. Look, he's winning the Heisman based upon what you just said.
Yes.
If he's being considered for the first, he's a quarterback in Notre Dame, he's winning the Heisman.
Yeah.
So he's winning the Heisman, getting to the playoffs, going in the first round. That'll be, man, he definitely made the right decision to come back to Notre Dame, because I don't know about you, I felt like he already worked out for teams when he threw to Michael Mayer at the pro day.
Right.
He almost got a jump on his pro day. And then if he goes out and executes like God Country Notre Dame Barbecue says, yeah.
It'll end in the national championship game.
Right. Somebody has to be the third quarterback taken, right?
Right. Exactly. Oh, goodness.
Now that the quarterback is significantly enhanced, it seems Notre Dame is more comfortable in 11 and 10 personnel sets. Will this aid the defensive staff in developing good depth at nickel?
I don't think Notre Dame not being in those alignments last year hurt them in developing depth at the nickel. I thought they had a pretty darn good nickel last year in Tariq Bracy. I don't see Notre Dame running a lot of 10 personnel, Sean, because I hope they don't run a ton of 10 personnel, because I don't want to take a tight end off the field, to be completely honest with you.
No.
And
I think we're seeing Notre Dame do a lot of stuff in the spring because of the lack of depth in the tight end room. I think a lot of tight ends are hurt. So, yeah, you're going to see a lot of 3-4 wide sets from Notre Dame because of that. Doesn't necessarily mean that's what they're going to go to in the fall, because Notre Dame is going to run the ball.
Yeah.
They're going to run the ball. But I do think with Sam Hartman at quarterback, you will see a lot more 11 personnel.
Yeah. Sean, here's one for you, because I haven't actually, other than Mission Barbecue, I haven't really been to a lot of the good barbecue places around here. I know you've experimented on the other side of town, because I live on a completely opposite side of town of South Bend.
Well,
from Andre Tonsel, best barbecue place in South Bend.
Yeah, Frankie's.
Where is that?
Question.
Is that downtown?
No.
Because there was one over by where we used to live in Mishawaka, and it closed down.
Yeah, that one closed down. I forget the new one. But I've had Mission as well. Mission has some pretty good sides.
Yeah.
And I had their brisket, which is pretty good. So Mission is
cheesy potatoes.
Yeah.
Winter seasonal things.
Yeah.
I may actually have to go get some of that now after the
I don't know if they close off a certain area in the restaurant, but I know every Thursday night that's where the offensive line goes. So I don't know if they close off the restaurant or just close off a certain area, but that's their place they go to. But Frankie's and then Mission. Frankie's rib tips are absolutely fantastic. And we didn't answer the second part of that previous question,
which was
the nickel is going to be helped more because the receivers are better.
You go.
Not because of the sets.
Yeah.
Guys are going up against quality receivers on a day.
Benjamin Morrison's going to be better because of that.
Yes.
Cam Hart's going to be better because of that. They're all going to be better because of that. Because they're being challenged. Like last year, it's like after the starters, it was kind of like, now it's like, okay, you're going against a third team, and it's like now you're throwing Jaden Greathouse and Braylon James and Rico Flores at me? Seriously?
Yeah.
And then you add the other Caleb Smith in the fall. Oh, man. It's a completely different universe than it was a year ago. There's no doubt. We've got a two-part question here from Matt Sekulowski. So you can go ahead and start on that first part, Sean.
Brian, I remember you saying that Jim Knowles' defense usually takes a jump in year two. Could you compare the complexity of his defense to Al Golden's? And do you think Golden's defense could take a similar jump in a year? From a broad view, it seems as if both guys run a complex defense that takes players a while to transition to.
Here's why it's different for me. And based on what Coach Golden did last year, Now, if Coach Gold makes adjustments to what he did last year, then yes, he can absolutely make a jump, Sean. You and I have talked about this. I have a great deal of respect for Al Golden as a human being and as a football coach. I just don't think he did a great job last year. He didn't do a bad job. He just didn't do a great job.
Mm-hmm.
The problem that I had with Al Golden, and this is different than Jim Knowles, is Jim Knowles has a system he believes in that's very complex. And the complexity means that it takes a while to kind of understand how to always be in the right position based on adjustments and movements and different things like that to what the offense does.
Yeah.
The problem with what Coach Golden did too much last year is they would just come up with like a completely different philosophy, not overarching philosophy, but a completely different plan of attack week to week. You know, where you'd say, man, what they did last week, they're doing something completely different. Like, and it kind of drove me nuts. And that's where you see in the NFL, you know, where you have a small base, but you're basically putting in new stuff every week to handle what you're playing. They didn't go quite that far because it's still a college football team, but there was too much of that. So, like, one thing I heard during the season that drove me nuts is I was told by multiple sources around the program that, like, in the Marshall game, the Marshall week, like halfway, like Wednesday, I think they kind of like scrapped a lot of stuff they were doing and threw in a whole new thing. And the thing was, we're going to go away from a running game plan and more to a pass game plan. What? Like what? Huh? Right. First of all, have you watched Marshall on film?
Marshall
They're going to do both.
Right.
They're going to do both. Their quarterback can't throw the ball more than 5 yards, 10 yards down the field. Like, take away their run, make Henry Colombi beat you. Should have been the game plan. Well, they didn't. They tried to take Henry Colombi in the pass game away, and they let the running game just take over. And so it's things like that, Sean, that are bigger issues for me. It's not so much complexity. It's just that there's not a strong enough foundation to build on week to week, because you're always going to add new stuff. You're not just going to run the same defense week after week after week. You're always making adjustments and alterations that are related to what your personnel strengths are, which evolve throughout the season. Like this, Al Golden could game plan coverage-wise a whole lot different late October, November, when they finally realized what they had in Benjamin Morrison than what you could do going in the Ohio State game.
Right.
Because you knew Benjamin was going to play, but you didn't know he was going to be that dude, right? Until he went out there and did it. And so it always evolves, but you have a foundation to build around. And I just feel like he didn't have enough of a foundation to build around. Whereas Jim Knowles has a strong foundation, and that foundation is very complex, but it doesn't really change. Meaning this is what it is. And once you learn it, it applies consistently.
Yeah.
And that's where our ability to match up comes from, because of our adjustments that happen because of what the other team is doing. And that's the difference in it that I think is why we see Coach Knowles have success in years 2 and 3 relative to year 1. Yeah. I don't know that Al Golden has that kind of track record that we can just assume that's going to happen, but it's possible.
Malik and I actually kind of talked about this, and his concern is that it goes back to something that Marcus Freeman said when Al Golden arrived on campus. He talked about Al Golden being shocked at how smart the players were and how much they could take in. And to me, and to both of us, it was concerning, because we're like, well, man, it's Notre Dame. You should expect, smart players. And secondly, give them less and allow them to become masters of that, rather than just giving them more because you can, and then they're not playing as fast as they can. It's one of those things where you wonder about him overthinking things. And I think the example you gave about Marshall is spot on. Like, here's the plan. Oh, you know what? Let me scrap this because I saw this and I saw they like to do this. So now let's go to something else. But I think, hearing his thoughts on his guys in the spring, even though it wasn't detailed, I think he feels like they have a better foundation and fundamentals from what he said to the media this week. So maybe within that, he does scale back, and they do have a foundation of who they are defensively, and then build off of that depending upon the opponent and the situation. So I expect them to take a jump because I think they're going to be more athletic.
Right.
I think they're going to be more athletic on the defensive front than they've been previously. Collectively, there is no Isaiah Foskey, but I think athletically across the board, I think they're going to be more athletic up front. I think they'll be more athletic at the linebacker position, and they're going to be faster and better in the defensive backfield. That is what changes defenses and makes defenses more impactful in turnovers and harassing the quarterback and tackles for loss and things of that nature.
Hey, Sean. So when you lean up,
I think it's my jacket.
it's keeps hitting your jacket.
Yeah.
So that's so I don't know if you can like hold it out when you're talking or something like that, but that's what keeps that popping noise. It's a sweet jacket, but it's making a lot of noise. All right, so let's get to some more here real quick. I want to get to some different folks here. Let's get down to John. That's a draft question. Oh, Sean, here is a question that I'm going to read because it's for you. It's a question for you from Omar Alston. He says, Sean, could you please rate the Quintana for Jimenez and Cease trade now that it's fully matured? This is obviously involving the White Sox, correct?
Yeah, the White Sox won. Quintana was brought over to win another World Series. He didn't. And Cease was second in the Cy Young and went 6 innings and I think 11 strikeouts last night against the Astros and got no decision, unfortunately, because the White Sox are like 0 for 11 with runners in scoring position. It's just ridiculous. But yeah, that's not even close. Jimenez and Cease won that trade.
All right, we got those baseball questions. We had a baseball conversation yesterday, Sean. So let's get to some more here.
Okay.
John A1 has a million questions. I want to kind of work those. Oh, here's an interesting one, Sean. This is a little bit of a fun one. Which is better from John A1? Which is better, popcorn from home or popcorn at the movie theater?
Well, I actually order the popcorn because I live literally around the corner from our theater here. So they deliver popcorn. They pop it, they put it in a plastic bag and put it in the box that you will have it in the theater, and they literally deliver it. It takes like 5 to 10 minutes. So I also do it from scratch.
Yeah.
In the pot. My mom taught me how to do it with the kernels. So
I'm not a huge popcorn guy. If we're just talking traditional popcorn, it's a movie theater. If we're talking like kettle corn or caramel popcorn, then that's good from home. I'm just not a huge popcorn guy. To me, I like it at the movie theater. I don't necessarily love it, but my wife's the popcorn eater in our family. She likes making it from home. She's like Sean. She'll make it like she doesn't get like the she used to, but she doesn't do it anymore. She would get like the bags and just pop the bags, but like for the last 10 years, she gets the kernels and she'll like make them. Like she'll make them homemade, like not homemade because the kernels are already there, but she'll make them like on her own, whether it be on the stove or she'll make her own bag, that kind of thing. And so yeah, she's like Sean. I don't like popcorn enough to make it at home. That's the thing for me. I was just saying how Ann Sean she's like you. She'll make stuff at home. She'll get the kernels and just like put stuff in it and make it from home. I don't like popcorn enough to do that. To be completely honest with you.
Really.
Yeah.
So you never had Garrett's popcorn any of your time in Chicago?
I like popcorn. I just don't love popcorn. Like if it's there, I'll eat it, but it's never like, man, you know what I'm craving right now? I'm craving some popcorn. It's the only time I ever really, and I think it's just because as a kid, this was what we always did, but I always need it when I go to a movie. At least because I've been, Pavlov's dog kind of conditioned for it over the years because we would always get it when we were kids. And but yeah, I don't really eat popcorn at home. And like Angela's like not really eating it right now. She's like kind of doing some different things right now food wise. And so it's like I don't even think about popcorn anymore because she just hasn't made it a whole lot lately. So yeah. All right, let's get down here, Sean. We have one from this is one of my other favorite names from ND Estimate Trucking LLC. So this is kind of related to what Sean you were saying earlier, and I'll read it because actually I would like for you to answer it since you brought these guys up earlier. In your opinion, who could potentially break out first over the next few years, Tyson Ford or Devin Houston?
I'm going to hinge that bet on who I've seen I've seen Tyson Ford. I know he physically has the talent. So I'll say Tyson Ford, but I really believe in Devin Houston. He
Yeah.
just seems, just talking to him, or not talking to him, hearing him talk, to me, he comes across as a confident kid that knows he's going to be good. Like
Mhm.
he comes across as that type of kid. And it's not in a braggadocious way. It's in a he's very personable, smiles, can answer and laugh with the media. But at the same time, you just feel like he's going to be that Christian Wilkins type
Mhm.
for Notre Dame, the same way Christian Wilkins was that jokey joke type of personality for Clemson, but he was a stud when he played. I see Devin Houston being that in the long run, but Tyson might pop first just because, like I said, Devin's been injured. Fall camp will be the first time he'll have an opportunity to really get out there. So Tyson might pop sometime this season.
I hope so. Man, I hope so. This
Mhm.
team would be a lot better if Tyson Ford is able to break out a little bit this year.
Do
There's
you
no doubt.
think Malik mentioned this? Playing 4 years primarily on the outside in high school and then being asked to go inside. How much of a transition is that, even though, because if you, does it change the way you play? Like if you're used to being in space on the outside and then they ask you, okay, now you have to go inside and learn how to play in space, learn technique, leverage. Can that set someone back a little bit before they go ahead and make the progress they need to make?
It depends on what kind of outside you were playing. Tyson played kind of a 5 technique, 4-eye-5 technique, so he played a little bit more big boy football than like a guy that's a hand, 2-point stance,
Mhm.
pure wide edge rusher. I think for Tyson, it has a lot more to do with Sean, as he was just so much bigger and stronger and more athletic than everybody else that he just never needed to know how to play the game fundamentally. And he's got a lot of Deion Colsey in him, in that he just was so much better than everybody played against, that he just doesn't understand quite what it takes yet to be great.
Mhm.
And when that light goes on, he will be just fine. He'll be just fine. And understand that, hey, it's not just about showing up on game day and playing. It's about the preparation that you put in physically and mentally going into that, which a lot of young guys need to deal
Yep.
with.
Yep.
And I think those are all learning experiences for Tyson up to at this point in time. And then there is the adjustment, because things hit quicker on the inside, Sean. I mean, they
Darn
do.
right.
Things hit
Yeah.
quicker on the inside. And getting earholed by a tackle is a different animal than getting earholed by a receiver or tight end. And that just takes some getting used to.
Yeah.
Takes some getting used to. We have a chat here from Jacob Steely.
Just wanted to say thank you, Brian, and great offensive tidbits on the member board. Can't wait for tomorrow's practice and to hear what you see.
Man, you and me both, man.
I think Brian, no one's more excited than Brian. This is
No,
Brian's
for
first
tomorrow's
full practice
in years.
in years.
In
So
years.
my boy's gonna be amped. He's
Yes.
gonna be amped.
Yes. Like, there's no cheering up there. I'm not cheering for you. I'm just glad to be here. Just glad to be here, guys. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it very, very
Yeah.
much. I got another big super chat from David Carpenter. David, thank you very, very much.
I appreciate your even-handedness through this off season. You have walked us back from the edge several times. Question: with what you know now, what are your top two concerns for Notre Dame going undefeated in 2023? Have they shifted? That's an interesting
As,
question.
as,
Have they shifted based upon intel we've gotten from the spring?
as far as, I think he's saying, like, yeah, I mean, I think with what's happened with the coaching changes, and I think he's kind of looking at the entirety of the offseason.
Yeah.
With Tommy leaving, Jared Parker getting hired, the whole Andy Ludwig thing, and just that whole thing. Of what I know, the top two concerns of Notre Dame going undefeated is twofold. One is, it's a really hard schedule. I mean, it's hard to beat Ohio State, USC, and Clemson in the same year for anybody, much less, a team that hasn't proven that they can do that in a very, very long time. That's the biggest concern. If we're just talking going undefeated, I don't think Notre Dame has to go undefeated to be a playoff team, most likely, unless there's like 4 conference champs that are undefeated, Sean. An 11-1 Notre Dame with, let's say, home wins over USC and Ohio State, and lose by a field goal road loss to Clemson, right, is a playoff team and should be a playoff team, in my opinion. So I think the schedule is number one. And then number two is uncertainty of I'm curious of your thoughts, Sean, but I'm cautiously optimistic about what Jared Parker is going to do. The thing for me is I still feel like offensively they don't need to scheme their way into success as much as they have in the past because their talent is just so good. Defensively, my concern is what are we going to see from Al Golden? Because I don't know an answer to because it's like I was talking to Jaden Mickey's dad or kind of tweeting back and forth with him today. And he was making a comment, and it was a fair comment about, man, all everybody's talking about right now is the offense. I'm like, well, we haven't really seen anything from the defense. They just kind of go through individual in practice, which is fine. I mean, that's great for the team, but it's bad for us and what we can see. So I'm like, hey, this scholarship linebacker at Notre Dame looked really good going through bags. Well, he should. He's a scholarship linebacker at Notre Dame. He should look good, going through bags and things like that. Hey, Benjamin Morrison looks really good on his back pedal drill. Like, okay, he should. He's a scholarship athlete at Notre Dame, that kind of thing. So it's just more of not seeing it. And so we have not seen team periods and 7-on-7 periods and things like that from the defense. I don't know if the linebackers are making fewer mistakes in practice right now than they did a year ago. So it's just the unknown of what are going to be the changes on defense. I'll say this, for the first time all offseason, it's just words, and this is why I'm looking forward to Saturday, Sean. Another reason I'm looking forward to Saturday is the things that Al Golden had to say in his press conference this week struck a lot of chords for me. And if he's serious about that, this team's going to be really good. Because if he's serious about – because it's exactly – what he said was basically his way of saying what we said last week and the last month, which is it's not here's where the players are, and Al Golden's got to go all the way over there and meet them. And it also shouldn't be here's where Al Golden is, up the players come all the way up here and meet him. They got to find that sweet spot somewhere in the middle that says we need to have enough complexity to go out and beat Ohio State and beat USC and beat these teams week after week. But it also can't be so complex that the guys struggle to play full speed and play assignment sound. There's a sweet spot somewhere in the middle, and it's up to Al Golden to find it. And it sounds like he understands that based on the comments he made this week. So that was probably the most encouraging. I don't put a lot in the press conferences, Sean. I don't. But that was the one thing I said, oh, okay, hold on a second. That sounds promising. Mm-hmm. And if he's serious about that, then then one of my two concerns is lessened quite a bit.
And this is the challenge for him, in my opinion. See, Ryan Day, for lack of a better term, would shoot himself in the foot. Or what we used to call in a basketball court. That's self-check. We only have to stick him. That's self-check. Right? Because Ryan Day would throw the ball against coverage for like 3.5 quarters without a clue that the running game even exists. So he helps you out as a coordinator. Lincoln Riley, on the other hand, he'll go run crazy and just take advantage of what you're doing to try and stop the pass. So that, for me, the end game is going to be I fully expect Notre Dame to be prepared for any opponent defensively. A great game plan. What are the adjustments going to be in game? That's what I want to see from Al Golden, how quickly he adjusts and how quickly his players can take the adjustments. I go to the Gator Bowl. I think they struggled trying to line up and get calls and all of that stuff. But once they finally got that locked down, the defense, for the most part, played darn good, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Played darn well. So for me, I don't know if it's top. Yes, defensive line is no longer as concerning to me as it was. And two things happened within the last week. The first thing that happened is I sat there and watched the pro day. And I said, if that's the talent Notre Dame has to replace on the defensive line, if they can't replace that athleticism, then something's wrong. Then we got a bigger problem. That made me feel better about what they had coming back and getting the youth to emerge on the defensive line, because I know the youth that they have are more athletic. Can they be more productive? They have to show that. But I know for sure that they're more athletic than what they lost. And then secondly, I just really believe that what we're hearing is what we felt like was coming. We, with our own eyes, myself and Ryan pointed out Josh Burnham and Jason Onye last year. We said, okay, we can see these two guys being difference makers in the future. And now we're starting to hear more and more about Jason Onye, Nolan Ziegler, Josh Burnham, Aiden Gabira, who I think was mentioned personally by Al Golden. So I feel good and much better about the defensive line, which was a major question for me. You know, immediately after the bowl game, I'm thinking like, man, what's the defensive line going to be like?
Mm-hmm.
Now, in concert with the linebackers, I think the defensive line is going to be well. I think the linebackers are going to be more athletic, and I think the rushing game defensively, they're going to shut things down a whole lot better against the run than they did last year.
Yeah.
Those are really my major concerns as far as going undefeated. So I feel a little bit better about those on today than I did, say, on January the 2nd.
Got a super chat from Tyler Evans.
Is there a coach this year that has a make or break year in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean the two top defensive staff coaches, Al Washington, Al Golden, are there for me.
That's on and off the field, right?
Yeah,
that's
recruiting wise, and again, positive steps, right? Happy about the positive steps, but they both have a lot to prove to me.
Mm-hmm.
Offensively, I don't know if anybody on offense is in a make or break. I mean, because two of your coaches are new. Jared Parker's in a new position. I don't think 1 year is going to define you. I think Chancey Stuckey's done a good job. I think Tommy Rees would have been in there if he'd have come back. He would have been in a make or break year. Like all the talent we're talking about now would have still been there. It's like, okay, he's done a really good job building the talent to this point. Now let's see if he can coach it. Right. I think that would have been a big question mark coming into the season.
I do think there's a coach on the offensive staff where there are no excuses.
No excuses, sure. Yeah. You talking about the O-line coach?
No.
OC?
Wide receiver for me.
Yeah.
Like there are no more excuses.
Yeah.
Like with the quarterbacks you have and the offensive line.
But I thought Chancey did a really good job last year.
Oh, we know for a fact that he did an incredible job. But like right now, the way everything is setting up, this wide receiver room should produce. They should come close to having one of the top 5 most productive seasons from the wide receiver group at Notre Dame, in my opinion, this year. Collectively. I'm not just talking about somebody just breaking out and having like an All-American season, which is possible. But collectively, you should have 2 guys over. Is it too much to ask for 2 of your receivers to be over 40 receptions?
Oh, God. I mean, it should be. I'm more like 3.
Oh, well, there you go.
I mean, if you're going to lower the bar like 40, I mean, it's like 40 catches for 600 yards, 700 yards. Yeah, you should at least have 2 guys like that.
Yeah.
At least have 2 guys like that. No question. And at the end of the day, stats are fine. It's to me, it's more about, are they making big plays? If Jaden Thomas has 2 catches for 25 yards, but they happen to both come on the last drive. Perfect example, Avery Davis. Avery didn't do a whole lot in the first 3 3/4 of the game against Clemson in 2020. He made 2 huge plays on the last drive of the game.
Last drive, yeah.
So that's what I care about.
Yeah.
You know, because we all remember the post route, but what a lot of people forget is he also caught the touchdown and did a great job. He was working outside, saw that it was covered, and he stopped. And Ian did a great job finding him and hitting him in that spot. It was one of the best throws that Ian ever made. That was actually a bigger throw than the post, because the poster is wide open. It's just, dude, don't screw it up. The touchdown pass was the bigger play because it was off script and he had to really fire that sucker into a little bit of a tight window. And, you know, so he stepped on when it mattered. So I don't really care if a guy has 6 catches for 100 yards, but then in the fourth quarter and the game's on the line, you don't make the play.
Yeah.
And that's what I care a whole lot more about.
Yeah, because you could have a kid with 30 catches, but 10 touchdowns. Right? That's productive.
Or like Deion last year. I mean, Deion didn't catch a lot of balls, but like every one seemed like a big catch.
First down, yeah.
You know, so you want to see stuff like that. You know, Tobias only makes 1 catch, but it's like, okay, but that 1 catch gave you a 14-13 fourth quarter lead and went for a touchdown, right?
Right.
It's the money catches are every bit, and that's what made Will Fuller so good. We all remember his speed and all that, and that's what we remember him out running Virginia and Malik throwing that absolute bomb and Kaiser throwing bombs to him against USC and Stanford, but it was the game winner against Virginia, the game winner against Temple. He made the money plays too when he needed to make those plays, and that's something that separated Will Fuller, in my opinion, from a lot of guys. Was Golden Tate made a ton of plays, but he wasn't always the guy that would step up when the game was on the line. Partly because they had other good receivers in the team, but also that their team was bad and blah 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 blah. But when Will Fuller needed to make a play, I mean, game was on the line. Even though the other team knew the ball was coming to him, it didn't matter. He was going to make that play.
Yeah,
and that's what I loved about Will Fuller that we don't talk enough about. And that's what I loved. Like, I love money players, Sean. That's what I love about Khalid Kareem, man. Like, he may only have like 5 sacks, but like 3 of them are going to be like third down, fourth quarter. Team's got the ball with a chance to win it or tie it. And Khalid steps up and makes a play.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I don't know what Khalid's going to do the first 3.5 quarters, but I do know this. If the game's close in the fourth quarter and somebody needs to step up and make a play on defense, he's going to do it. And that right there is my second biggest question on this defense this year. They didn't have that last year. In the fourth quarter, the defense is not why they lost to Stanford. The defense is not why they lost to Marshall for the entirety of the game.
Right.
Having said that, you had a 19-14 lead in the fourth quarter. Excuse me. You had I can't remember what the score was, but you had 14-12, I think is what it was.
Mm-hmm.
You had a lead against Marshall in the fourth quarter. You had a chance to stop them and give your offense the ball with position to put them
back up on their own goal line.
Correct. 3rd and something at like their own 9, and you couldn't make a stop. Nobody stepped up and make a stop.
Yeah.
Yes, the offense played like trash against Stanford, but they gave you a lead in the fourth quarter, and you let them go right back down the field and kick a field goal to go back up. Who's going to be that, okay, I'm stepping up to make a stop this year? Nobody emerged last year in the front 7. Now, Benjamin would do that in the pass game.
Yeah.
Right? But you can avoid him. Right? I feel who's going to be the front 7 guy? Who's going to be the safety that steps up and makes those plays?
We know JD made that play. They just reversed it against Stanford.
Yeah, but that was, I get that, the fumble.
Yeah.
But that was on Notre Dame, in Notre Dame territory.
Right. You're talking about before that.
Like,
yeah.
Yes. No. What I mean is on that drive. Yes, that was a bad call. Yeah. But that was in Stanford territory. That was with them still on their side of the field.
Right.
There was a lot more plays after that.
Right.
Where you had chances to go down and make a stop and they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, it's fair to say that. But it wasn't like that was on the touchdown play or something like that, right?
Yeah.
There were several plays. You still had chances several plays after that to make a stop, and you couldn't make a stop.
I think it's fair to throw JD's name out there. He should be able to make those plays.
Correct. They all need to be able to do those things more. 100%.
Yeah.
Who's going to step up and be that guy?
Yeah.
Jalen was that guy for Notre Dame in 2015. Sheldon Day was that guy in 2015. The defense would stink the whole game, but when they needed a stop, Jalen would step up and make a play, or Sheldon would step up and make a play.
Yeah.
Kavari would step up and make a play. And that's not a coaching thing. That's a player thing, right? Because they did that with Van Gorder as the DC. And Al Golden is a way better coach than Brian Van Gorder was, right? So you can't blame the coach for everything that goes wrong. At some point in time, you got to say, hey, this is on me. This is on us.
Yeah.
We're going to go out there and make this play. Everybody do your job and kick the guy across from you's butt. And why didn't they make that stop against Marshall? Dudes didn't do their job. They didn't cover the flat route. They didn't see the tight end or fullback coming across on the flat route. Didn't do their job. If they'd have done their job, I have no doubt that Maris would have made that play.
Yeah.
But he didn't do his job.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the key. That's a big, big key, in my opinion, for them. We have another super chat down here, Sean, from Kevin Horton.
Hey, Kevin Horton, will they go 6 deep at linebacker on game day? What's your way too early 6? Will Junior be moved back? Will C-Lou be moved to safety? Will the press ask these questions? It's a lot of questions.
Well, the press ask these questions. We already know the answer, right? I mean, if they're going to move him, they're going to say they're going to move him. If they're not, if they haven't already decided to move him, I could ask them whatever you want me to ask them, but they're not going to answer it.
No. So
do I ask the question that I know they're not going to answer? Or do I try to find something more productive to ask? Right. So I don't know the answer to that. As far as will they go 6 deep on game day, it depends on if 6 guys force them into saying they're going to do that. Now, the thing that I'll say is it's a lot easier to go 6 on game day now than it used to be when you were in your base defense 85, 90% of the time. because now you could have, let's say your starting linebackers, for argument's sake, are the same 3 veterans from last year: Jack Kaiser, J.D. Bertrand, Marisol, just for argument's sake. And then you're going to rotate in 1 or 2 guys into that rotation. Let's say 2. Let's say Prince is going to be part of that. And let's say Jalen Sneed. And then you can say, okay, in our nickel package, we're going to design this role for Nolan Ziegler to have this nickel role like Jack Lamb had in 2019 and like then Bo Bauer had after that. Let's just say we're going to do that. That's 6 linebackers playing. But it's not necessarily 6 playing in the base defense. It may be 4 guys playing in the base defense, and then 2 guys are part of your nickel package. So I think that the fact that you have packages now can allow you to play more linebackers in your defensive rotation and not just give the cop out of, well, a lot of them played on special teams, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's a lot easier to do that now. Will they get to 6 this year? I still think a lot of guys, Jalen Sneed needs to prove he can be more consistent, right? Prince Colley needs to prove he can stay healthy and is locked in. Nolan Ziegler needs to prove that he can be assignment correct. I mean, there's guys, Drake Bowen and Jaden Osborne got to prove that they have picked up the defense enough to be ready to play and all. I mean, so those guys got to all prove themselves to a degree. If they do, I think it'll be easy to get to 6 linebackers, especially if you're willing to include the sub packages as part of that, then absolutely, I think you're able to do that.
And then 6 deep is, I think Notre Dame is 6 deep at linebacker, talent wise.
Like
it's up to it's up to the coaches, man. Like how they use guys, where they want to use guys. But I think Junior right now is kind of solidified himself on the outside. And man, from what I've watched, they like the way he set the edge, particularly against the run, and he's kind of growing into that position. Junior down the line, man, you give him 1 full season, next season, he might be really good.
I'd like to see him maybe play some big end.
Yeah, he might end up. He might be the perfect replacement for Nana once Nana moves along.
I still think Junior should be playing Mike. I do. They don't think that. So
he was probably the most instinctive Mike.
Yeah, last spring. Yeah, I still don't understand that one.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right, here we go. Here we got another super chat here from Nathan Milton.
And my previous question related to Jack Swarbrick. Which one? Jack is head coach, BK is OC, and triple option, or BVG would be the hardest to take?
Oh, I mean, Brandon Gorder being back is easy. I mean, literally would be terrible.
You mean you wouldn't want everybody being able to audible on the defense?
Oh, my God. Oh, these guys are trying to give me like PTSD today, man. You guys are killing me. Like, what did I do to deserve such horrible treatment from you, Nathan? What did I do to make? Why do you hate me, man? That's what I gotta know, Nathan. Is what did I do to you to make you do this to me today on a Friday, man? I just don't understand. I thought we were boys. Oh, you're getting me, man. Sean, let's get back up here. We got one from John A1.
Between now and fall camp, is it typical for true freshmen to make a big jump before the season starts?
Some, yes. If they're going to make a jump, Sean, that's when you see a big jump happen, is sort of in those summer workouts, whether they played in the spring or not. I mean, Benjamin Morrison wasn't in the spring last year, and the summer workouts were invaluable for him.
Yeah.
Because there's less, it's more technical work. It's more teaching. It's less stressful. Practice, I got 2 hours to get this work in. Where you're out there summers working with your teammates and they're talking you through things and you're asking questions. And, that's why I feel like the interactions between coaches and players in practice are invaluable. They're very important, obviously, but there's always different aspects to learning that are needed as well. It's like your teacher has to be a good teacher, right? But, that tutor you have helps you a lot too, right? Yeah. I mean, and so you it's not that one's better than the other. They're both a key part of that piece. So like when you see a freshman, so when Braylon James is out there this summer and he hits that sort of that summer wall, you've got Tobias there to say, hey man, look, you're good, right? I went through this last year, or Dion or Lorenzo or whatever, having those veterans, like, here's what they're looking for. Here's what we need you to do here. I've been there. I think those aspects are incredibly valuable. And that's also where a lot, even more of the the team building comes, where the freshmen have now gone through the spring and they're now more embraced by the veteran teammates. And then so that relationship strengthens.
Yeah.
And so there's a ton of now you're 8 months into the Matt Bayless strength program if you're an early enrollee compared to 3 when spring ball starts. So there's just a host of reasons why you tend to see pretty good jumps from spring to fall for these guys. All right, let's get to the next question here from we're going to stick with John A1 and do one more related to the linebackers.
If the starting linebackers in 23 are J.D. Bertrand, Nolan Ziegler, and Jalen Sneed, what would it mean for the defense? What does it say about Al Golden? It means the defense is much more athletic and faster.
Yeah, and it means Al Golden had a legit competition in the spring.
Yeah.
Right? That's a great sign.
Yeah.
And Sean, you did not put enough emphasis on that. It means this linebacking core is going to be fast.
Yeah.
If those 2 young bucks are starting at linebacker with JD, because now JD goes from being your most athletic linebacker to your least athletic linebacker.
Yes.
Of the starting lineup. And if JD Bertrand's your number 3 athlete at linebacker, you're freaking athletic.
You're fast. Yeah.
Because I don't know if you guys, I know you guys have talked about it a little bit on your show from time to time, but that's something we constantly push back on. The notion that JD Bertrand is not a very good athlete is very misguided. Now, is he lack length? Yes. Does he lack ideal size? Yes. But JD Bertrand does not lack for athleticism at that position at all. At all.
And I think people will see this, to go back to what you were discussing earlier about the recruiting and how it's changed. The 23 linebackers, the 22 linebackers, and the 23 linebackers are some of the best instinctive linebackers in the country. I'm talking about kids that see it and go. Even if they're wrong, they'll get coached up on the back end. But they see and they go. And if they mess up or they went to the wrong fit, okay, we coach that up. But no more of this getting caught flat-footed or taking a half step in the wrong direction and trying to, struggle to scrape over the top. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many times I saw Marcus Freeman talk to the linebackers and tell them, you got to get over that. You got to scrape over the top and get over that. That should not be a problem, if these 3 are the starting linebackers this year.
They're so much longer. I mean, Jalen's not a lot taller than Jack Kaiser. He's just a lot longer.
Jalen's just a dude.
Yeah,
I pray for Jalen's health, because he's like a heat-seeking missile. Like he's a kamikaze. He just goes, right? He's fast and he plays fast. And I just he gives up his body. That's basically what I'm saying. You love it, but I just want him to stay healthy because we need him on the field. I just want him to stay healthy. The kid plays hard though, Beatrice. Yeah. He plays hard.
Just needs to be refined.
Yeah.
Right.
What was that? The third, maybe that play on the drive, where we were trying to figure out. He rushed from the outside, and we're trying to figure out why is he still on the ground? What happened? Because it was almost like no one touched him. Like what happened? But he plays with so much energy. Like that's the only thing I think that can really stop him from being a star. It's just health.
Yeah. Yep. Here's a question from Garland Doxy.
With the clips Indy has released from practice, is it possible to have 2 wide receivers with 800+ yards and 5 touchdowns?
Certainly possible. Yeah. I think 800 is a lot more realistic than like 1,000. People say, 1,000 yards, 800. Yeah, it's certainly doable.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's certainly doable. There's certainly a possibility that can happen. I'll go back to what I've said before, Sean. I just wonder if the ball's going to get spread around too much. That's the only question that I have. Is the ball going to get spread around too much for that to happen? But it wouldn't shock me because I could see Tobias stepping into one of those roles. And then the question is, okay, does a second guy step into that kind of dude role? I think more likely is one guy has that 800+, and then a bunch of other dudes are 400, 500+ is what I think is more likely, because there's just so many guys that are going to get opportunities to make plays. Because let's say they put Braylon James in the game and he's just out there kind of part of the rotation, and then he happens to take the top off the defense for a 60-yard touchdown. We just took 2 or 3 catches away from your teammates in those situations. So I could see a scenario where one guy's there and a bunch of other guys are 400 or 500 plus in that regard.
I think one of the tight ends have a great opportunity to be the forgotten guy, because I think this is that season that Notre Dame finally makes teams come off of the tight end position because of film they put up in September, and then you might get a Holden Stays that ends up with 5 touchdowns over the course of a season. So maybe not 800 yards, but definitely the production and the touchdown.
We have another question from, let's see here. Let's go down to ND Mac.
With the struggles breaking into the offensive line, would it make any sense, or is there any possibility of Rocco Spindler getting a look at defensive tackle? I've seen this a couple of times on the board.
I just don't see it.
Yeah.
I mean, if he's too heavy-footed to play defensive or offensive line, I don't see how he's going to be able to play offensive line. Not in this particular defense, in my opinion. I just don't see it. I don't see it.
Yeah, I agree.
Seth Clark asks, what are the chances of Notre Dame landing Bryce Young? Pretty good.
Pretty good.
Very strong. Very strong. I would call them the leader and have been, in my opinion, for a while, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Here's a question from Josh Miller.
How often do you get that itch to coach again? I haven't coached in years, but for some reason I've been wanting to get back into it.
Rarely. I don't really. Hey, look, I loved parts of coaching. I loved the relationship with the players. I'll never forget the times when the players would come over to my house and my wife would make dinner for all the kids, and and then afterwards, one of my top receivers is struggling with a thing with his girlfriend and he needs to talk to me about it, or getting that 2:00 phone call from one of your players who's in a bad spot, and teaching them how to play the game and teach them how to be young men. And I miss all that stuff. And I miss game days a ton. I love game days. That battle of wits that's going on between you and the other coaches. But there's so much of coaching that I hated, especially at the level I coached. We didn't get into planes and fly from place to place. We were driving everywhere we went, and just the politics of it and just a lot of that stuff I just couldn't stand. And I don't miss that at all. And I love what I'm doing. Honestly, I think that's part of it too. If I was just working a 9 to 5, and this is no disrespect to people that work a 9 to 5. I mean, y'all make the country work. I don't work a 9 to 5. I don't drive a UPS truck like my dad did growing up. I'm not working construction like my cousins are. I'm not working at a prison like my uncle did. I'm doing something that's a blast that I love, that still has me affiliated with the game. So a lot of the stuff that you may not be able to get if you, depending on what you're doing for a vocation, I get paid basically, essentially, to break down film and to watch film and to study the game and get on a podcast and talk football. Like I had a guy that's asked me to come on his podcast next week. They do national stuff, and he's like, "Yeah, we record at nights because I have a regular job." And I'm like, "That's cool, respect that." But I'm so blessed that I don't have to do that. But the fact that this is what I do for a living, a lot of the stuff I would otherwise miss about the game, I don't miss because I'm here. I'm at a college football game every Saturday.
Yeah.
I'm paid to basically go to a college football game every Saturday. And so I just don't have those same attractions, those same pulls. Now, I did early on, Sean. You know this. That's why I got back into coaching back in 12 and 13. But I kind of got that beast out of my system, and I just haven't looked back ever since. And I was reminded of all the reasons why I got out in the first place.
And don't be fooled by this guy. He's talking about he doesn't work a 9 to 5. He's right. He works a 10 to 2 a.m. in the morning. No one works harder than this guy. He's the only person that I know in my phone, probably other than my parents, that if I called at 2 a.m., he probably would be up. Be like, "What's up? I'm just writing this article. What's up, buddy?
Watching film." Yeah,
exactly.
All right, got one from Irish Mills 540.
Where's the best place to sit in Notre Dame Stadium? Where's the best place to tailgate and must-dos on campus /game day?
The best place to sit, honestly, is what's your preference? I mean, I like to sit high and see everything kind of guy. Other people like being down on the action. Some people like being in the corners because then they can kind of see everything from a different angle. They're never directly there. Just depends on what your preference is. One of the great things about Notre Dame Stadium is, unless you're right in the middle of the opponent's the opponent fans, which would be uncomfortable, there's really not a bad seat in the house. And that's
No.
the great thing about bowl stadiums, and Notre Dame is still a bowl stadium on the inside. It doesn't look like a bowl anymore outside, but it's still a bowl on the inside. That curve means that there's not a lot of hard edges where you can't see stuff. There's no poles. There's nothing obstructing your view unless you happen to be one of those people that's like right behind the flagpole, which I don't really even know what that would look like, but it just depends what your personal preference is. For me, I like being on the top row because there's no upper deck per se. I like being on the top row, and somewhere between the 30s is where I like to sit, because then I can just kind of look down and see everything. That's for me, that as far as place sit, that's the best one. But I like where I get to sit now. I like up in the press box. You know
I feel the same way. Like when I like to go to games in general, I usually get the 200 section so I can be elevated just a little bit and get a nice view of everything. But I must say, the tickets I had for the spring game last year, which is pretty much behind the Notre Dame bench, they were pretty phenomenal. I was like row 30 up right behind the Notre Dame bench. Those are pretty phenomenal tickets because I was kind of like an angle. It was pretty dope. And then you could hear the conversations going on the sideline as well. Maybe not on actual game day, because it's a little bit louder than on the spring game, but that was a pretty good experience. That was a pretty good experience. But I'm like you, I like to be elevated a little bit. Yeah.
Best place to tailgate. It's just where it's where your people are. I kind of like the Joyce lot and the stadium lot because there's just so much tailgating going on there, and you're right by the stadium. But as long as you're on campus, they're all pretty cool places. I think the Joyce and the straight, like down the line nature of the parking lots, to me, is good. Makes that pretty good. But then you don't have the corners where some of the other smaller parking lots, you can actually have, if you're lucky, you can get a corner and be set up there or on some grass. I think the must-dos for me, Sean, is the player walk. It's a big one. You'll see the player walk.
Yeah.
You get to the bookstore, tour all the facilities, get over to the grotto. Just experience the campus. That's really the big thing for me. But wherever you are, make sure you're back in time to watch the player walk. I think that's a pretty cool deal. It really is a cool deal.
Yeah, player walk at other schools I've experienced, and I've yet to experience it at Notre Dame, but I'm pretty sure it is just like anything else on that campus on game day, like breathtaking.
Yeah. It is truly a gorgeous campus. And everyone will tell you that. People from other teams will tell you that.
Yeah.
It is a beautiful campus. There's no doubt about it. All right, here's an interesting one from Zach Martin, a non-football question.
In your lifetime, how many dogs have you had? What kind and their names? Me, Guinness, Cavalier King Charles, and Conway, mini Australian Shepherd.
Boy, that is a good question. So when I was born, the dog we had, his name was Lido. He was a golden retriever. I have very vague memories of riding on his back and house we had on Grand Avenue. Then we had a German Shepherd named Achi. And then the next dog we had was another golden retriever named Bubbles. My sister came up with that name. And then the next dog we had was a little, I forget what breed he was, but it was Buddy was our next one. And then we had another golden named Daisy. That was my dad's favorite dog all time. And then the next dog then after that, it was Ange and I. So we had Brady. So we were pretty early in our marriage. I said, we're not going to have a dog. We don't have time for a dog. You work. We're both in school full time. This is when we're living out in Denver. We're not going to go get a dog, but here's what we'll do is we'll go to the shelter and we'll let you play with dogs and stuff like that. Get that out of your system. Dumbest thing I've ever done as a husband, like literally the dumbest thing I've ever done as a husband. So we get there and we're going through the thing and she's playing with different dogs and cats and all that kind of stuff. And we're walking out and I'm like, okay, we made it. We made it through and she didn't fall in love. And I look over and I see this little rat terrier with like black and brown. You've seen pictures of Brady.
Yeah.
And he's just in the back scared. and him and Angela lock eyes and they just stay locked. And I'm like, oh, crap. So I said, hey, look, let's go home. We'll talk about it, pray about it. And then I'm thinking like, she'll get over it.
Right.
And we're sitting there watching a movie that night. And I'm like, what you doing, babe? She's like, oh, no, I'm just working. So, okay, honey, like it's a little weird. You're just staring at your computer. And I walked over there and she was just staring at the picture of Brady on the website. His name was Max.
Oh, wow.
Was his name in the shelter.
Yeah.
And I was like, we're getting the dog, aren't we? She goes, can we please? And so we went and got Brady, and he was the amazing dog. And then now we have Sadie and Rita. Yeah. Sadie is a Cairn Terrier, and Rita is a Red Bone Coonhound. So those are the dogs that we've had, like either with my parents or since Angela and I have been married. Yeah. Those are the dogs we've had. And we got Rita the weekend that Notre Dame played Navy in 2016. I'll never forget that because she was going to go volunteer at the one of the shelters. And I said to her very specifically, don't bring a dog home. She didn't listen to me. And I'm glad she didn't listen to me. But it was just going to foster, to be a foster parent. And but after about a month, I was like, yeah, we're not giving her up. And then Sadie we got because we were still doing fostering for this place, and they brought Sadie over. She had just had her leg amputated that day. Like it's like a Friday. We can't leave her here in the place all weekend. We need someone to take care of her. Can you do it? And so they brought her to our house, and it took me about a week. And I was like, call them and tell them we're not giving Sadie back. We're going to keep her, failed foster, and tell them that we're not fostering anymore because we're going to end up with 13 dogs. Because like once they're in my house for a week, it's over. I'm not giving them up. So. Yeah. I was like, we're not fostering anymore because we're gonna be that weird couple with like 13 dogs, and so those are our dogs, Sean. Those are the ones we've had.
I've had 6. My first one was my grandfather at his shop. His dogs that guarded the shop, they were German Shepherds. So we got a puppy from their litter, and his name was JR because his dad's name was Dallas.
Oh, there you go.
Get it? So of course, his father's name was Dallas, so we thought it would be cute. We called him JR, and then JR actually passed away because he got out, and one of our neighbors had some pesticide in their garden, and he ate something, and we found him, and that was tough. And after that, we really didn't want a dog, so my mother ended up getting a poodle. Her name was Princess, and we really took care of Princess. She actually became our dog, even though she was my mom's dog. The only time my mom really paid attention to her is when she was watching TV with her, watching her soap operas and stuff like that. Other than that, whenever we came home from school, the dog was with us in our room. Mm-hmm. So it was Princess. And then I got married, and my first gift, my wife wanted a Pomeranian. So we bought a Pomeranian, and his name was Sugar. And Sugar was probably the smartest, most conniving dog I've ever had in my life. Like he would create arguments between me and my wife because he would find a way to get out of his cage. He found out how to flip the latch and get open, and she would always tell me, "I told you to put him up last night." And I'm like, "I did." Like the commercial where they throw the little red flag, like, okay, let's see. I wish I had that back in the day. Like, look. So one day I was at work, and she was with him, and she put him in the cage, and she just waited around the corner, and she heard him flipping the latch, and she walked around the corner and said, "Stop." And she found out, like, oh, I guess you were telling the truth. Like, I told you, this dog is a magician, man. Like, he just knows how to get out of the cage. And so we actually lost him on 9/11.
Oh.
Because we usually let him out in the front, and I would walk outside and stand on the porch. But I remember letting him out, and he usually runs right to the left and then comes right back. And we were so fixated on what was going on TV that morning. It was about 15 minutes had passed, and we both were like, "Yo, where is he at?" We go outside, and he was gone, and someone returned him like 4 months later. We got him back. And by that time, my daughter had been born, and he snapped at my daughter.
Oh, yeah.
And so my wife was like, he has to go.
Right.
Like, there's no way he's staying here. And then we ended up getting a Rottweiler, which is crazy at that point in time. But he was like so protective of my daughter when she was an infant. You know, it was so funny because my daughter maybe was like a year, and I was training him, and she would see me do something in training because I would tap him on his head if I was trying to get him not to do something. And so one day we're like, "Where's Ari?" And we look up, and she's downstairs in the basement. She has let Max out, and she's saying, no, Max," and patting him on the head. She's emulating me, and he's just sitting there, just like
Mhm.
looking at her, you know. But he was probably one of the best dogs because that was kind of like her infancy and who she grew up with.
Mhm.
And then recently, I think that's dog number 4 or 5. Recently, we had another dog that she wanted for her 16th birthday, and she named him Blue
Mhm.
after the raptor in Jurassic Park.
Okay.
Yeah, and then
Not after the
Blue,
dude from, what was that movie called? Old School?
yeah,
Blue,
no,
you're my
not him.
boy.
No, not him. Not him. Yeah. So and Blue was a Maltese, and she gave Blue away when she went away to school.
Okay.
She gave him away to her aunt
Okay.
who wanted a dog. So, but we can go get Blue anytime.
Okay.
Still to this day, we'll go check on him.
So, Sean, it's kind of interesting. Well, for real quick, I remember what Buddy was. He was a Cocker Spaniel. You talk
Mhm.
about like devious dogs. That's one of the things I loved about Brady, the first dog Ange and I had.
Yeah.
He was very, when it came to food, very conniving. So, favorite story is two favorite stories. One is I was not there for, but Angela and my grandmother went out for lunch, and my
Mhm.
grandma had put her food in the back seat. She'd, in one of those plastic bins, and she had shut the bin and all that. And they came back out, and Brady was just sitting on the back seat, all good. They looked down at the thing. The thing was shut, right? It was closed.
Yeah.
She gets home, and Grandma sees a couple, or Angela sees a couple pieces of fries on the side. She said, "Well, that's kind of weird." She opens it up. It was all gone except for the burnt fries. He had opened that thing up, ate the burger, ate the fries except for the burnt ones, and then somehow shut the lid back on the thing.
No way.
And then there was another one. Ange and I were making a cross country trip, and we had left the food in the front, and he was in the back. And I walk out, and Brady's looking at me. He had gotten one of those turnovers from Arby's,
Yeah.
and he had the wrapping, and he was
Yeah.
backing up with it. Like he said, he'd gotten into the front seat, like he went on the thing in between. He
Yeah.
had put his head in there, pulled it out. He was backing up into the back, and he looks at me, and he just drops it, and then keeps backing up. It was so
Oh.
funny. Like, I ain't do nothing. It's
Those
not on
small
me.
dogs, the
It's
small
not on
dogs are
me. Yeah.
always the worst. They're
It's not on
always
me.
the worst.
I don't have it. I don't have it. It's
Oh
not on me.
man.
Yeah, it was great. He was an awesome dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was an
Yeah.
awesome dog. So, all right,
Yeah.
let's get back to some football real quick. Uh, here's one from. Let's go to Luke Breeding.
Brian, is there any must-dos the Friday before the spring game or before the game?
I don't know a lot as much about what happens the night before a spring game or all day of a spring game, Sean. I don't know as much about
I
what they
would
do
say,
for that.
well, I don't know if I want to give this information away. Well, I'll put it like this. Myself and Malik stayed at a certain hotel, and there were a lot of the recruits and their parents that stayed at that hotel.
Yeah, don't tell people that.
So I won't say that. But no, I'm just saying for us, it wasn't like we planned it. It
Mhm.
was just like, oh, hey, what's up? What's up? And of course, the crazy thing was a lot of the recruits knew Malik,
Okay.
so it just turned into, and then that night turned into like a 3-hour conversation between myself, Malik, Eric Hansen, and I forget the other gentleman that was like one of the former editors at the South Bend Tribune. And it was just like, man, they were sitting there drinking a Nora whiskey and testing out Malik's whiskey and sharing, old Notre Dame stories. It was informational for me, who I thought I knew a lot about Notre Dame, and those guys pretty much laid it out. So that was pretty cool. It was almost like it felt like a conversation that our guy should have been part of.
Mhm.
Rest in peace to Lou.
Lou, yeah.
Yeah, it's just those type of conversations where Notre Dame is not just about touchdowns, but just like you know people, politics, information, interesting facts. It was a really great conversation to be part of.
Let's get to some more questions here, Sean. We've got one here from John A1.
How can an offense maintain intense physicality while attacking with 11 or 21 personnel versus 12 and 22 personnel?
I think one of the most misguided takes that I see some people have, and I don't think John's necessarily going there, I think it's a valid question, is that the personnel you use defines, like, you can't be physical if you're not 12 personnel. It's nonsense. Like, to me, physicality is physicality, whether you're running out of 10 personnel or you're running out of 11 personnel or 22 personnel.
Yeah.
All that changes how many people you have in the box. If you're in 11 personnel, your 5 linemen, your tight end, and your running back should be physical. How do you maintain physicality no matter what you're doing? How do you practice? How do you prepare? Do you teach your guys to be physical? I don't care if Harry Heastan was coaching a team that ran 10 personnel or 0 personnel, meaning all wideouts.
Yeah.
You know what his offensive line is going to do? They're going to be physical.
Yeah.
It's about your approach. I think there are some schemes that make it a little harder to be really physical, harder to be physical, but it's about teaching, Sean. It's about teaching, and it's about preparation, and it's about accountability. What do you demand that from your players? Do you demand that from your receivers? Do you demand that from your quarterback? Do you demand that from your linemen, your tight ends? If you're demanding it from them, I don't care what your personnel is. You're going to be physical.
Yeah.
I think that there's a difference in being physical and being a smash mouth team. A smash mouth team is more defined by their personnel, Sean, because of the type of concepts that they like to run. But if you're an 11 personnel team, put it like this. I thought the 2017 Notre Dame team was very physical. They ran a ton of 11 personnel that year, a ton of it. And so it's not about the personnel in that regard.
I would much rather be, and maybe I have physicality mixed up as far as definition, but for me, I look at it from a boxing standpoint where you have a physical boxer that can only come forward. And just because you have a boxer that is a skilled boxer, that doesn't mean that he's not a physical boxer. That means he just has different ways to use his physicality in a boxing ring. So I look at Notre Dame with 11, 12, 21 personnel. I thought they were pretty physical against North Carolina in 21 personnel. Even though they were utilizing the running backs in the passing game, I thought they were physical out of that formation. And I think, people coming out of 11 personnel, especially if you have a tough-minded slot receiver that doesn't mind cracking back and hitting that defensive end or hitting that linebacker, man, you can definitely be physical and dictate. I would much rather be a dictator on offense to defenses than to just line up and say, I'm a physical offense, come stop me. No, I can do whatever I want to do. And I'm dictating the situation with personnel. And I think the perfect example of that, which I think this year specifically, especially because they have new quarterbacks, I think Georgia is going to suffer from that. I think Todd Monken did a great job of dictating from 12 personnel. Like, he could dictate whether they want to be physical and run the ball, and they can still be physical and pass the ball off play action and stretching the field. So I think being able to dictate, which is something I hope Notre Dame gets the opportunity to do based upon what they come out of the spring with, more of an opportunity to dictate offensively than they previously had, which, no, we've had offenses that were just physical offenses that could just line up and be physical, but we couldn't necessarily dictate to the defense, what we want them to do. It's something, man, Brian and I don't know, did you tell the story of like how we looked at each other during the pro day?
Yes, I did. About please put 8 in the box. Yes.
Please.
Yes.
And we did it simultaneously. We looked at each other like, please let teams play us the same way. Please let teams play us the same way. Because now this is a year where we get the opportunity. This should be an exciting year, Notre Dame fans. I'll be honest with you. I think I don't know what Notre Dame fans are going to do if Notre Dame comes out and rattles off touchdowns 4 consecutive weeks on their first drive. Notre
Yeah.
Dame fans they might flip their lid, right?
Yep.
But that's, for me, I think that's something that's going to be an addition. A team that starts fast. Marcus Freeman finally gets that part of his vision to be manifested this year, in my opinion, because they're going to come out and they're going to dictate the teams. Like, you come out, you go 11 personnel, but you have Aldrich Estime in the backfield. Like, are you going to ignore that? And then because Jaden Thomas is a pretty good blocker in that slot.
Mm-hmm.
He's a pretty good physical guy in that slot. So really, you almost have two tight ends in certain situations on the field. So you can kind of quasi from 12 personnel to 11 personnel with the same personnel. That's what I'm talking about. That's physical football. When you can dictate to the defense what you want to do to them and then do it. And that's what I see Notre Dame being able to do.
My takeaway from all of what Sean just said is Sean said he wants to be a dictator. That's my takeaway from what Sean
Come on, man. Come on, man. I'm just joking. I'm just playing along with my guy.
That's a great answer, Sean. It's a great answer.
Well,
Josh Miller here with another question here, Sean.
Is Notre Dame's defense going to be fluid week to week? And when a defense is so fluid, will you see more teams switch the defensive play calling to a safety? Based upon what I've seen in practice, the two most communicative groups are the linebackers and the safeties. So the linebackers are talking, but the safeties are talking as well. And Al Golden made mention of that.
That has to happen.
When he
your
spoke
safeties
to the
have to
media.
Communicate, Sean.
Yeah,
they have to. If your safeties aren't communicating, I mean, they're the only ones that can see everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the linebackers can only see what's in front of them.
Yeah,
that's it. I mean, your safety, and that's what was so good about that 2018 defense, because Alohi and Jalen Elliott were so good about making sure everybody knew what they were doing in front of them. Yeah. And they're, you have to have that.
I think it was Prince Colley,
yeah,
who spoke about being better at making checks
and
communicating this year,
right?
Because he has to be able to go ahead and be that wealth of information for the younger linebackers. So.
Well, and the other thing too, Sean, is like this is what I've tried to tell people. The defense is going to get somewhat better this year simply because everyone's going to know what they're doing.
Yeah.
The question is will they be able to consistently stay good, or will it be a back and forth because the years you're young and you got a lot of new starters, they're not as good because they don't know the defense as well. You can't do that.
Right.
You can't be that guy.
Right.
And so, but it's going to be better than it was last year. It's just, is it going to be good enough? Yeah. That's the question. And that's why I always laugh when people say, compare Al Golden to Brian McGordon. There's no comparison. Al Golden's a good coach. The question is he a great coach? Right now, he hasn't proven he's a great coach. He's a good coach.
Yeah.
He did a good job this year. He just didn't do a great job. They needed great, and he didn't give them great.
Yeah.
And the other guy was terrible. So, there's just no comparison. There's no comparison. Here's one from Paulo Salazar, Sean.
Hey, Paulo, who are your team captains for the season? I think we've kind of saw you get a sneak peek in warm-up drills for Notre Dame, who the team captains or the candidates might be.
Sure.
Yeah. So they had 6 last year. Is it 6?
Yeah. A couple of them are back. JD's going to be a captain again, right? Yeah. He's back. Jack Kaiser was, I believe, a captain last year, wasn't he? Was Jack Kaiser captain last year? I can't remember.
So. I think
front
Joe
seven. Joe Alt will have a shot to be one.
Yeah.
Maybe Sam Hartman, depending on how they handle that. I'm not quite sure how they're going to handle that one.
Yeah.
I imagine Zeke Correll might have a shot to be a captain this year.
That's a good call.
Blake might be in the conversation. Blake Fisher might be in the conversation for that one. I think defensively, obviously, a guy that I'm very curious to see about his ability to develop to a captain is Cam Hart. I want to see if Cam kind of takes more of a leadership role this year for this team. Defensive line wise, that's an interesting one, because a guy that I've noticed has taken a leadership role this offseason, but he may not even be a starter, is Nana. Nana's taken a lot of leadership stuff from the team this year. So he's a guy that I could see being part of that captain conversation as well. Nana Osafa Mensah.
Yeah, I think Cam Hart, from what we saw last weekend on the lacrosse field, I think Cam might definitely be a captain for this team.
Yeah.
What do you think about? For me, I think he garners respect from the coaches, and the players seem to love him. What about Howard Cross?
I could see that. Absolutely, I could see that. Yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
I think
I
he
mean,
garners so
does
much
everything you want him
respect.
to do.
Yeah,
Yeah. I could see that.
yeah,
I could see that. I could definitely see that. And he plays hard,
yeah,
does everything you need him to do, shows up every day. I
yeah,
mean, yeah,
yeah.
I could definitely see that. I could definitely see that. Here is from Chase Talks Sports.
What is the best coaching staff in Indy history, and does the current one come near it?
I mean, you gotta go back to 1988 for that
88.
one for me. 88, 89. I mean,
Yeah,
you had Barry
man.
Alvarez was still your D coordinator.
Yeah,
I think was it Jim Strong was the
Jim
OC,
Strong,
although Lou Holtz was really the play caller for that team. You had Joe Moore.
no
I mean,
more.
the guy that the current award is named after. So yeah, I'd say 88, 89. That coaching staff before Barry Alvarez left was really flipping good. Actually, matter of fact, hold on a second. I think I got the 88 yearbook right here.
88. And minus, I would say this. If they had one different coach, just one, that 14 staff, and I'm only speaking from, I've actually been convinced of this, but I know Malik talks about that 14 staff and just the guys that are around and where they have gone on in their careers.
Yeah.
It was like, yo, we had some pretty good guys around us, like even the GAs, the assistants. He was like, it was a pretty good staff. Of course, Van Gorder
I mean,
was there. But
yes, Lou Holtz versus Brian Kelly, and then Van Gorder compared to anyone with a pulse.
That cancels anything out.
All of it. And Scott Booker's your special teams coordinator. Pass. But you still had Tony Alford was still your running backs coach on that team. You saw Mike Denbrock on that team. Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur to me didn't do a great job that year. Now I know he did. I know that the quarterbacks liked him, but he did nothing on the recruiting trail. And that's part of being a coach.
Yeah.
Here's the 1988 staff. You had Lou Holtz as the head coach. Now keep in mind there's only 8 full-time assistants back then. But you had Barry Alvarez was your defensive coordinator. John Palermo, longtime defensive line coach in the NFL, was your D-line coach. George Stewart was your DN's coach. Chuck Heater was your defensive backs coach.
Yeah.
Longtime coach. You had Jim Strong was your running backs coach / offensive coordinator. Pete Cordelli was your receivers coach. Tony Yelovich and Joe Moore were your 2 offensive line coaches. That was a heck of a coaching. And then you had Vinny Serrato as your recruiting coordinator.
Yeah, that's tough. And you throw in Lou, Barry, and Vinny and Joe Moore. That's a Mount Rushmore of a coaching staff right there.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what the difference was for the 89 team. I'm very curious what that one was. I'll see what coaching changes, if there was any coaching changes on that team. Because Barry was back in 89.
He was back in 89.
He was back in 89. Yep. I'm trying to see what the coaching staff was. Yeah, it was pretty much the same. Jay Hayes was the DN's coach. Yeah, there was only one change. And that was a guy named Jay Hayes took over as the DN's coach. So that was it. It was the only change. Thanks to Loose Emoji and Tim Priester for those, because that's from the old BGI thing. So yeah, that would be it. 88, 89, those 2 years. It's pretty flipping good. Pretty flipping good. All right. Here's one from Tom Spagnolo. Thank you, Tom.
Brian Sean, if you had a say in who the starting linebackers were, what would it look like?
So, somebody provided it earlier.
Yeah.
In one of this, it'd be Jalen Sneed and Nolan Ziegler for me, or I would have Jack Kaiser in Nolan sort of rotating at will.
Yeah.
Maybe have Nolan. No, I'd almost want to consider having Nolan do what Tavon Coney did in 2017. Because remember 2017, Tavon Coney led the team in tackles and tackles for loss, but he didn't start. I think it was like Niles and was it Greer were the starters, but Tavon would play at both. And Drew Trank was the rover that year.
Mm-hmm.
I could see something like that, some kind of thing like that, but that's where I would be. Jack Kaiser's got to play somewhere.
Jack gives you versus Jack to play rover, wheel, The only position
Mike
I
in a
would want
pinch.
to Mike in a pinch,
Mike in a
yeah,
pinch.
in a
Yeah,
pinch,
because he could get you lined up. He
yeah,
could get you lined up.
yeah,
That'd be the
yeah.
thing.
But if Nolan shows you that propensity to be able to go ahead and be the leader and get you lined up, then he's that next Mike with the versatility to play Will, and then you can get Prince Collie in there with Kaiser's versatility if you want to move him out and give Jalen some rest at Rover. So they got talent and flexibility.
Yeah.
They have
Yeah,
talent
there's
and
no doubt.
flexibility.
There's no doubt. Let's get to another one here. This is one from Joe Medina. We were talking about
Well,
Jabron Payne earlier.
Brian, do you think Payne also flipped because the injury forced him to think of life outside of football, as well as he felt Notre Dame gave him the best opportunity to prepare for that?
I think so, and that's kind of part of the answer to the question that we were talking about earlier is if he doesn't get hurt, he's not at Notre Dame. He's at Michigan or Ohio State or Penn State or a place like that, and
Hmm.
he's going there. I mean, he was in Indiana, so Notre Dame could flip him from Indiana because their position, the guy that recruited him there came to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And so that's how you know that the position coach has faith in him and is going to give him a shot if he earns it and he's healthy, because that's Dylan McCullough brought him here.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that's part of it. I absolutely, I think that's part of it. No question. Was it the end all be all? No, I don't think so. But Joe's not saying that it was the end all be all. But was it a
Yeah.
part of it? I think it was definitely a part of it. I think anytime you have a injuries like, and not that he had like devastating life altering injuries, just constantly banged up, constantly hurt. And I think his junior year was the knee injury, and he was just banged up his whole senior year. So yeah, I could definitely see that. No doubt. Here's an interesting one from Chris Irish Young, Sean.
Second live show in a week. What is a worst take? 247 guy Kelly versus Freeman recruiting take. On three, not having CJ Carr in their top 10 quarterbacks in 2020.
Oh, the on 3 ranking is the worst. I mean, look, I definitely think that Marcus Freeman's recruiting better than Brian Kelly, and I've made my case to say so. But there are things you could point to and say, no, it's not really any better. And I wouldn't agree with it. I'd say you're wrong, and I'd have an argument against you. But there's no argument you can make that CJ Carr is not a top 10 quarterback in this class. There's no argument you can make to me that he's not a top 25 overall player in this class, much less top 10 quarterback. I mean, CJ Carr to me is flat out one of the 25 best players in high school football in the 24 class. There's no debate for me. And so that's the thing for me is if you're going to have a take, Sean, that's debatable, even if your argument is weak, it's still valid. And so the comment that the guy from 247 made, I think is an error, but it's at least debatable, right? I think he's misguided. I don't think he thought through the answer. I don't think he did any research to come to the conclusion that he came to. I think he went with perception and feel and just kind of saying what everybody else says, right?
Yeah.
But it's at least a debatable answer. And you know, because somebody said, well, you know, you can't really give Freeman the 22 class because Kelly was here. Okay, it's fair. I mean, we can have that conversation. I would have things to say. I still think Freeman is the primary reason that class was as good as it was,
especially defensively.
You know, right. But the thing is, like, if Cooper came on the show, it'd be a debate. We could debate it.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody from On 3 wanted to come on the show and make a case for why CJ Carr was in the top 10, I would just destroy them. Because it's a stupid argument.
Yeah.
It's just there's no validity to it at all. Yeah. And so that's a far worse take to me than what Cooper said about the Brian Kelly versus Marcus Freeman thing. Far worse take for me. And that's not debatable for me. That's a terrible take. CJ Carr is the number 200 player in the country. If there are 199 players better than CJ Carr, there will never, ever be another recruiting class as good as this one in the history of the earth. Like, that is just an absurd take, an absolutely absurd take. So, I mean, why not just have Trevor Lawrence as the number 50 player in the country coming out? I mean, it's like that absurd. It's just absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. Just, oh, God, such a bad take. All right, let's move on. All right, let's go to Monoler here with a question.
What do you think of Nolan Ziegler having most of his reps at Mike? Thanks for all you do and represent.
I don't know that that's accurate. I know that there was a comment made there.
Yeah.
But that was based off of a couple practices. He's going to be moving around all spring. I think it's smart to have him working at both spots to a degree now that he has a little bit firmer grasp of the defense, because I could see him playing at both spots. Because right now, if Prince Colley's around in the fall and he's healthy and not injured, you have Marist, you have Jack Kaiser, you have Prince, you have potentially Jalen Steed that could all play Will. Our question we keep asking ourselves, who's the Mike? You have Jaden Alsbury that could play there. I think Drake could play those spots. Who's the Mike? J.D. Bertrand and then Drake Bowen, right? Like, who's a true freshman? I think you need to continue to enhance your Mike depth chart. And could Nolan play there? Sure, he can play there.
Yeah.
But I don't think he might have gotten more reps there early on simply because he's already played Will, and they need to give him some work at Mike. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case by the end of spring. I think he's going to play both.
You have to. You have to prepare somebody in the case that J.D. Bertrand can't go. You have to get someone prepared behind him that can not only play the position, but can also make all the plays, checks, and everything. So, like you said, Brian, we already know what he can do at Will.
Right.
Yeah.
It does concern me because you wonder, are they going to give him a chance to start if he's playing Mike? That's my frustration. It would be my concern if he does that the entire spring. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes. Let's get down here, Ryan, to Jeremy Welling.
So what do you think about Hartman saying Buckner is smoother and more talented than he is? He's an honest kid.
He's right.
He's honest.
Look, there's never been a debate about who has more physical God-given ability. It's Tyler Buckner, and everyone in the room will tell you that. And I think Sam would probably tell you he's probably third, just raw arm talent, because it's Kenny Minchie. But there's a lot more to being the better quarterback than that. And it's that experience that you can't discount and fit in what they're trying to do. But no, Sean, listen, man. I know that a lot of Notre Dame fans have written off Tyler Buckner because he had a bad game.
I
don't get it either. I don't understand it. And then, he's just a runner. Okay. The kid is incredibly talented. And, is his time going to be 2023? I don't know. I'm not sure. But here's what I do know. He's very talented. And if he's ever the starting quarterback again in Notre Dame, he's going to be really good. That's what I know. And Sam sees that. And as we had in our intel piece yesterday, there's a lot of people in Notre Dame that believe that's why Sam has been so good so far, is because he's looking in the room like, okay, people told me I need to come to Notre Dame because I have a quarterback. Yeah, they do. So I'm gonna have to be on top of my game every day if I'm gonna be the starting quarterback here. And I love hear that from Sam too, because number one, it's a comment that a leader makes. Because he understands we're going to need Tyler, and I want him here, and that kind of thing, and he's going to make me better, and that's what a veteran brings to the table. And so I love the comment. I mean, first of all, I hate when people ask guys about other players at their position. I can't stand that. It's just a big pet peeve of mine, and that's the former player in me talking. Like, you want to know about that dude? Ask him. I'm here to talk about, you want to ask about my receivers, fine, but I'm talking about my backup quarterback. You want to know about him? Go freaking talk to him,
Yeah.
But most of these kids answer it well.
I just think, to turn your back on Tyler Buckner is you're just lacking a little bit of perspective.
It's misguided.
Just a little bit. Thank you, Jack Swarber. But no, it's just a little bit, you're being unfair to the young man. I think the kid was really a red shirt freshman, honestly, starting his first game on the road against Ohio State.
Right.
And no, did he play well? Absolutely not. But let me tell you,
he didn't play bad in that game either, though, Sean.
No. But let me tell you the most impressive thing about Tyler Buckner that pays dividends if you will allow him to continue to develop. I've seen kids wilt in that same situation. Ohio State, disappointment against Marshall, injury, wilt, forgotten about. This is a tough-minded kid. This is a tough-minded kid. is the type of quarterback, and you can believe us or not, his teammates love him
Yes.
because they respect him.
That's
They
another problem that came about last year, Sean, is people would rave about Drew Pine's leadership,
uh
and too many people took that as, well, that means Tyler's not a leader. That's
no,
not what we're saying,
no,
and that's what frustrates me is like you always got to give a million clarifying comments, or people are going to take
mhm,
what you didn't say to mean something that you no. If I go out there and say, "Man, Braylon James having a great fall camp, and he's doing a great job," so Jane Greathouse isn't playing well. What? No,
no.
what are you talking about? It's it's a little frustrating.
He's
Not
he's a
gonna lie to you.
tough he's a tough, resilient kid that is getting better.
Right.
In football terms, he's just a sophomore, man.
Yeah.
He's a sophomore in terms of reps and just
Right.
he's a
Missed 2 full
sophomore.
seasons of his high school career from a development standpoint. Yeah.
You know,
You're
you
right,
want to
Sean.
rave about what Stetson Bennett did for Georgia at the ages of 24 and 25,
Right.
right? Okay. Then let Tyler Buckner get his opportunity.
Tyler
And
Buckner, who's 20, by
yes,
the way, and will not turn 21 until late in the season,
late in the season.
FYI.
Let him get his
Think
opportunity
about
at
that. He's in
21
his
and
3rd year of
22.
college, and he's 20 years old,
Right.
and people are already writing him off. Oh, he is what he
Yeah.
is. He's 20. He won't turn 21 until I think after the Clemson game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
You don't
he's
want to
6
lose.
years away from how old Stetson Bennett was when he won his 2nd championship.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, here we got one from Johnny S.
It seems that the national football media gives Brian Kelly more of the benefit of the doubt than they used to now that he is at LSU.
I
What do
don't
you
agree with
think?
that. I don't agree with that at all. I think they always gave Brian Kelly the benefit of the doubt, which is why you'd constantly hear the media talk about how Notre Dame doesn't have talent. They don't have talent.
Mhm.
They don't have the player. It's amazing what Brian Kelly can do with the lack of talent Notre Dame has that that he's working with. Where did they get that from? They got that from freaking Brian Kelly and his people. Oh man, what a great job Brian Kelly did with no talent. What a great job Brian Kelly did with blah 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 blah. He always had talent. He freaking pissed away talent. You know what I mean? So, I always think
Well,
Brian Kelly's gotten the benefit of the doubt. Always. It's just now it's more annoying to Notre Dame fans because it's not their team that they're defending or their coach that they're defending. That's why I've said this, Sean. The notion that Notre Dame lacks talent is not so much a national media thing as much as it's
yeah,
a Brian Kelly thing because he
yeah,
constantly talked about that
yeah,
on and
yeah,
off the record,
yeah.
and especially off the record.
And that's not to say that the things that he said weren't true at some point.
Right.
It's not
Or
to
to
say
a
that
small
to a
degree.
degree, he had obstacles at Notre. Every head
Yes.
coach is going to
Nobody
have
said that
obstacles
Lou
at Notre
Holtz
Dame.
did. Nobody said that it
Absolutely,
wasn't harder
absolutely.
at Notre Dame.
It's the way you embrace
Right.
Notre Dame and choose to portray it.
Right.
He chose to portray it to put him in a positive light. And
Like
all he
the
did, which you don't
2021 team,
deserve.
Sean. I'm
Mhm.
sorry to cut you off, man, but this
No, go
pisses me
ahead.
off. Like how young the 2021 team was. What?
The
Young?
whole Joe Klatt interview prior to
Oh my
Wisconsin.
God.
Remember
You have
that?
a 5th-year starter at quarterback. You have a junior at running back. You have a 6th-year senior at right guard. You have a 5th-year senior at right tackle. You have a
Yeah.
senior, a junior 3-year starter at center. You were young at one, and your young sophomore was Michael Mayer. You were young at one spot, left tackle. That's it.
Yeah.
And like last year, Marcus Freeman had a legit reason to say, we're young. We got
Mhm.
a young team. Notre Dame started 8 true sophomores on offense in the bowl game. True sophomores. Did you ever once hear Marcus Freeman complain about the lack of experience or the lack of veteran play on his football team? Did you ever once?
Nope.
He actually had a legit reason to use that excuse. You never heard him use it. Ever. And that's the stuff that drove me nuts. And people would eat that stuff. They'd eat that stuff up, man. They'd eat it up. Oh, it's just no like I'd have been like, is this guy serious? Like, I'm looking at your roster right now, and I don't see a lot of youth here, cuz I don't know what you're talking
Man.
about. But they would eat it up, man. They'd eat it up. Oh, Notre Dame lacks experience. They lack speed. And I'd hear that. And because you ever notice what teams, players constantly shock people at the combine in the last 5 years? I can't believe Notre Dame's player. And we were like, dude, we told you. We told you Miles Boykin was going to test off the charts. We told you Chase Claypool was going to blow. We told you Kevin Austin was going to blow it up. We told you Drew Tranquil was going to do this. Because this is what we know. We see it. But you guys have bought into the narrative, oh, they lack team speed. Sometimes they have. Sure. Sometimes they have. But you just buy this stuff and you're just like, the thing that would make it so first, you knew where it was coming from. It'd be one thing if the outsiders just didn't know a thing about Notre Dame's football team. Like, like the Cooper thing, it didn't bother me. It was a terrible take, but it didn't bother me. I don't think it was personal. It was more of you had a coach that would talk your team down. It's lowering the bar. And he's already doing it to LSU. I mean, you're already hearing LSU fans justify 4 losses last year. Well, it was this, it was that, it was this other thing. And that's exactly what's going to happen under Brian. He will constantly talk down the expectations to where he can then justify what his record has been. Yeah. And then if you ever point anything out like, well, you did kind of go 5-5 against ranked teams the last 3 years. You beat up on a bunch of unranked teams. Then, you get your credentials revoked and, try to blacklist you and all this other kind of stuff. I'm being hyperbolic there. But that's the thing is, and then Notre Dame fans would lose their minds. Oh, you're a hater. You're anti-Notre Dame. You're anti-admin. Like, no, I'm the most Notre Dame defender ever because I'm saying the standard should be higher. Yeah. They should be doing more to help the football team. They should be demanding more. They should be doing this. They should be doing this. But I'm not going to talk it down and accept a lower standard because it's hard. It's hard. Yes, it's hard. Did you not know that when you took the job? If you did, then you're an idiot. Of course it's hard. Stop making excuses. Stop talking down the standard. Embrace the standard. Marcus Freeman had a million excuses he could have used last year. And no, Brian Kelly never took away my credentials. I said I was being hyperbolic, right? But my point is Marcus Freeman had a lot of legitimate, hey, look, we lost our 2 veteran receivers before the season even started, basically. We lost our starting quarterback in the second game of the year. Mm-hmm. We started two true sophomores at offensive tackle. We have 5 receivers. They're all young. We had to play Matt Salerno against Ohio State. He could have gone through a million reasons to excuse last year's performance. He never did it once. Not once. Yeah. But Brian Kelly would constantly make excuses for the things that he did. And the reason they have success, Notre Dame didn't do this, Notre Dame did that. And that's what pissed me off so much about it, right? No, that's no one else's fault that you called a jet sweep to Chris Brown inside the 5-yard line the first time he'd ever carried the football against Northwestern. It's nobody else's fault that you decided to go for 2 when you were already up 11. Right? That was the dumbest decision I've ever seen. It was nobody else. It's not Jack Swarbrick's fault that you called a rollout go route with Tommy Reese as a true freshman who had just come off the bench right before halftime to replace an injured Dane Chris when you're already in field goal range. Right. That's not our admissions. Here's why we made that. Our admissions process is really tough. And we don't really have a chef here. And we don't get this support. So I decided to make this play call. Right? No. That's on you. Well, it's not my fault that I kept Brian Van Gorder. We can't afford to pay coaches. You paid the dude $1 million. You could have got any defensive coordinator you wanted, basically. So don't talk to me about that. And when that came out, there's a lot of Notre Dame coaches on that staff that were pissed when they heard that because they're like, I'm not making that kind of money. I don't know why that guy's making that kind of money. And so that's not on anybody else. That's on you. And that's the stuff that pisses me off. And that's something that so far Marcus Freeman hasn't done, and I respect that about him. And I hope he continues to be that way. I really do.
Yeah.
I really do.
He's good enough to occasionally win a game. He'll beat the teams he's supposed to beat. Yep. But then he'll find a way. Like people will talk about, that was a tremendous comeback. They almost came back and beat Florida State. Why were you being outplayed so thoroughly for 3 quarters?
Right. By a team that lost to Jacksonville this week.
Forget the ending. Why were you being thoroughly outplayed? Why did you get thrashed by Texas A&M, who had nothing to play for at the end of the year? Just how do you get thrashed like that?
Thrash, Sean. Thrash.
How do you go to Arkansas, who was decimated, had no quarterback, offensively couldn't do anything, and then go down to the final minute where you have to have your freshman All-American come up with a play to seal the win.
Right.
That's right. That's who he is. That's
Mhm.
who he is. He's going to find a way to magnify that to make it seem like he did such an incredible
Yep.
job.
Yep.
No, we didn't have
Yep.
any talent. It's Louisiana and LSU. What are you talking about?
My favorite part, and with all due respect to Frank McCaffrey, who's our LSU fan in the chat. We love you, Frank. But the funny thing is so many of these national LSU people just self-own themselves, right? Like they'll get mad at me for saying LSU was a dumpster fire, and
Right.
then justify the job Brian Kelly did in the 4 losses, saying,
Not saying the same thing.
walked into, they only had 30-some scholarship. I'm like, so it was kind of a dumpster fire, right? Yeah.
Right.
Oh, wait,
Right.
no, it wasn't. You know, it's like, well, he'll do well recruiting. Well, based on what? Well, you don't have to recruit very hard to recruit at LSU. Okay. And then he signs a top 5 class. Like, well, look how good of a job he's doing. Like, you guys just told me this whole year that it's not very hard to recruit to LSU. And now
LSU.
you're trying to say that that's some kind of own. Like, you guys self-own yourselves all the time.
Yeah.
But that's what Brian Kelly does. He puts you into that corner where you kind of have to do that. And, you know, and the thing that frustrates me, Sean, is it takes away from the fact that he is a really good coach when he wants to be.
Yeah.
When he's willing to stop making excuses and go put in the work, there's a reason Brian Kelly got to Notre Dame in the first place, because he's a very good football coach. He just kind of got into this. He's got this thing where he just cannot accept responsibility when things don't go right. So it's Sam Mustipher's fault that we called a shotgun snap for 4 quarters in the middle of a freaking hurricane, literal hurricane. That's Sam Mustipher's fault. Well, okay, whatever, dude. You know, it's ridiculous. Anyway. Oh, goodness gracious. All right, here we go. Andrew Sakalowski.
What are the physical traits you look for in a Viper versus Big End, and how does their gameplay or technique differ?
Well, the biggest technical difference, Sean, is one's in a 3-point stance and one's in a 2-point stance. The Viper's almost always in a 2-point stance in the base defense. The Viper has a lot more responsibilities, a lot more different type of responsibilities. They both have a lot of responsibilities, but a Viper's got to drop into coverage at times. You saw Isaiah Foskey last year running on a wheel route against Syracuse, running with Sean Tucker on a wheel route. You're not going to see the big end do that. Well, Brian McGorder did that once against Arizona State on a wheel route after they had just cut the lead to 3. But good coaches don't do that. The Viper, they both have to set the edge in the run game.
Yeah.
They both have to be good pass rushers, but you definitely need more of a quick twitch edge rusher at the Viper position.
Yeah.
The big end has to be a little bit more physical at the point of attack. He's going to face a lot more double teams. The Viper rarely has someone outside of him on offense other than a receiver. The Viper oftentimes will line up with a tight end on his outside, so he's got to be able to beat double teams. There's got to be really good block destruction from both, but even more so from the big end. The big end needs a little bit more butt, Sean, to be able to kind of play that power football.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have to be 290. You know, Adetokunbo Ogundeji was 260, right? Khalid Kareem was 260.
260.
You know, they were very physical. I mean, Khalid was one of the best edge setters that in college football his last year. I mean, he was really good at that.
Yeah.
And you know, so those are the differences for me. The Viper, you both want them. You want length from both of them. Yeah. You'd like to have length from both of them. The Viper could be a linebacker type, a Josh Burnham, Junior Tuihalamaka type. You know, that kind of guy, Jordan Patel type. It doesn't have to be an Isaiah Foskey, but you ideally want some length at both of those positions.
Let me ask you a question. Would you rather have versatile interior guys or versatile ends?
Say that I'd never had versatile ends.
Okay, so that's why the reason why I asked, because I'm thinking about, of course, our guy that's about to be drafted in the NFL that was at Alabama. He literally, depending upon the situation, played all 4 positions on the defensive line. Will Anderson did. He played Viper in certain situations when he first came up, and then he played big end in certain situations. And, you know, he's right in that 265, 270 range, to whereas he was able to do both. That's why I asked the question, because I was thinking about Shell today. Certain situations, they would put Big Shell on the outside.
Yeah, and like a 5 technique.
And like a 5 technique and let him come. That was the guy I was thinking about. That was on the inside, and then, you know, in certain situations, you can bounce him outside.
Riley Mills be that guy now.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
Jason Onye could maybe be that guy. Tyson Ford. You'd like to have guys like that for sure.
Yeah.
I just think having an end. Well, I'll say this: I'd rather have a versatile Viper and a versatile 3 technique. That's my order.
Okay.
I don't necessarily need a versatile big end.
Okay.
So it's two different answers, right?
Yeah.
So when I think of versatility, like to be able to have a Viper that can drop into coverage, can stack if you want to go 3-3.
Yeah.
You know, to your point, you're going to need one of your 3 techniques going to have to come out and play a 4-eye or a 5, right?
Right.
And then your Viper's going to have to stack. Your big end's not really being impacted there in that situation. He's still similar to what he's always doing.
Right.
So it's Viper needs to be number 1 most versatile guy. Your interior guy, your 3 technique, and then also at times your 3 techniques to be able to slide inside and play in an A gap, as well. So I'd say Viper 1, your 3 technique 2, in regard to the priority order of being versatile. So I can't. So it's harder to answer that outside or inside because I view them a little different. I don't need a lot of versatility for my nose. He can play shade or he can play a 3 or 2-eye. It's not a lot different to me.
Yep.
Let's get to some more questions here, fellas. Let's go to Archer 452. I'll read this one, Sean, because I know I know my answer to this, and it's a no. So I'll let you get a shot. Are you watching WrestleMania this weekend? If so, what do you think will be the match of the weekend? Give me Paul versus Rollins. I don't have a clue who those people are. With the IC triple threat as my second choice.
So I do not watch wrestling. My younger brother is, the biggest wrestling fan in the world. And he gave me a call last night at about 8:30 telling me about the lineup. So I love the women's division right now in WWE. And I like some of the lineup that they have. But the Paul versus Rollins is the Seth Rollins storyline, and everything going into that match is very interesting. So I would rock with Archer on that one. But I think it's always the undercard that ends up being a little bit more entertaining at WrestleMania. I'm trying to think. The undercard in WrestleMania entertains me more than the main event. At least I would say 50% of the time. And I might be lowballing it. Like, because true wrestling fans will say, yeah, I get more entertainment from some of the undercard than I get in the big time match. Because the big time match is something normally that, unless you get a matchup like when we had Undertaker versus Hulk Hogan or something like that, or Andre the Giant versus Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold versus
even those Andre the Giant Hogan fights I thought were boring because neither of them were like Andre by that point in time. His back was shot.
Physically couldn't go longer than 5 minutes. He couldn't physically do it. So
he would just let Hogan carry him for a little bit, and then he'd get pissed and like do some big slaps.
It was needed to really put Hulk over. And
Correct.
Make him that superstar.
Correct. And Andre was that guy. Hulk was never that guy, from what you hear. But you know, the era where I felt the main events were always the best fights was kind of in that 3-4 year window of the Attitude Era, when you had Stone Cold, The Rock, DX, Undertaker, Kane. There were so many great storylines, and most of those guys were good wrestlers.
Yeah,
you know, really good. I mean, Stone Cold. I mean, nobody took a stunner like The Rock. He would sell the heck out of the stunner. You're flopping around like a fish on, out of water. Those were some super entertaining matches. Like I was bored one like 3 o'clock in the morning, couldn't sleep, and I was watching that. Remember the one where Mike Tyson was the guest guy, the referee or whatever?
Yeah,
man, that was a great match, and the way it ended was entertaining, but like it was a great match. And that's where I was always a WCW. I was WWF as a really little kid. Then I became a teenager as more WCW because I thought the WWF got lame with all their weird gimmicks, like it was. But then when the NWA came, NWO came, excuse me, a little bit different. When the NWO came, it just, at first it was really entertaining, but then it's like, okay, every match is going to end with them interfering, and they're going to be 87 NWO guys beating up that one guy, and the fans are going to be throwing stuff, and it just was like, And then that's when the Attitude Era really took off in WWE.
Yeah.
And that's when it's like, okay, that was a great era, great era with some great some great main events SummerSlam had great main events. The Royal Rumbles were a lot better. And then WrestleMania was really good. And
Yeah.
after the Attitude Era is when I kind of stopped watching wrestling, to be
Yeah.
honest with you.
Yeah,
And
like
I didn't
someone
hate
said
it.
in the chat.
I had better things to do with my time.
Like someone said in the chat, the Hogan Ultimate Warrior main event was fantastic. Like
Yeah.
every now and again, you'll get those fantastic main events, but WrestleMania just in totality is that undercard is usually like
Yeah.
the things you remember the most.
Yeah.
And
What was
I
the,
would
what was
say
the one?
this:
Go, Sean.
the era you talked about, what made that so great is because you had WCW on the other side as well.
Mhm. Yep.
Those Monday Night Wars, man, that was for forget who was winning in the ratings. The wrestling fans won.
Yeah.
Every Monday night. Like we won. Like who cares about Eric Bischoff tells a great story. Like because at that point in time, I think WCW was beating WWE, and even though they were winning the ratings, WWE was winning from a revenue standpoint
Yeah.
somehow, some way. And he gets called to a meeting at Turner Sports, and they're begging him to like emulate WWE narratives, the storylines.
Mhm.
And he's like, no, we're winning doing what we do.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and he said when he left the room, he knew that was the beginning of the end.
Right.
And that eventually Vince was gonna win out. So yeah, man.
So Hulk and Andre was WrestleMania 3. Do you remember what the best
Yeah.
match of WrestleMania 3 was? And it was not even close. One of the best WrestleMania matches ever. Macho versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Do you remember that match?
I'm trying to remember how it went.
That was it was like a really long match. It was one of the greatest matches I've ever
I
seen.
think yeah.
And Ricky the Dragon Steamboat beat him. They had some great matchups, man. Some great matchups.
And that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like even Andre, and that was the main event, that wasn't the best match. And that's exactly what I mean. Like usually the best match is on the undercard.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right, let's get to some more. I also love about Mailbag Friday because we'll always get some like non-football questions that are really entertaining. You know, so yeah, here's a 3-part question from Jesse Ferguson.
Which current Notre Dame wide receiver, freshman included, has the highest upside in your opinion? Who was most underrated by the fan base? And where does Caleb Smith, the elder, fit from a talent perspective?
It's a good questions in there, Jesse.
Man, he's not on
Who
a
has
walker.
who has the highest upside to me? It's between Tobias Merriweather and Braylon James, and they're different. Their upsides are different.
Yeah.
Braylon brings more true home run potential. Like, you know, I could see Braylon being like a Will Fuller type. And Tobias is the better all-around guy, great route runner, you know, can stretch the field. You know, if I'm trying to think of who I I've compared Tobias in the past to T. Higgins. And that to me is who they are. Braylon James, if he reaches his full potential, is Justin Ross, who is a 1,000-yard guy on 50 catches. Where if Braylon hits his full potential, he's T. Higgins. He'll have also 1,000 yards, but he'll have it on 75 catches.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a similar, like that's if they both reach their peak, who I see them being. They're that kind of player, in my opinion. So those are my 2 highest upside guys, including the freshman at the receiver roster, Sean. So first part to that's my first answer. What would you say to that first part of the question?
I would agree. For me, is Braylon and Tobias, as far as upside, underrated by the fan base. And I honestly, man, this is just me personally. I'll go Lorenzo Styles Jr. And I understand the vitriol. And look, coming into last season and even in this season, you tell me who has proven that they could be a number 1 on a given day, other than him.
Going into last season, he was the only one. Going into this season, Jaden Thomas
has proven it as well. So that's what I'm saying. Like we're talking about 2 guys that have actual film that we can do it. So for Lorenzo, for me, it's all about his mind. Like if his mind is right, he physically can do it because he's done it. You know, he's really been healthy. I don't know of any injuries he dealt with last year. He's been, for the most part,
Lorenzo up here.
Yeah, Lorenzo's been healthy. So
I think Lorenzo has the tools to be very good. I just don't think he has the highest ceiling.
Yeah.
That's my only thing.
That's why, to me, I think he's underrated because I think people have kind of just cast him to the side because all of the freshmen and, you know, Lorenzo Styles can make some really big plays.
Jaden
that
Thomas
has a
is the
big
guy for me,
moment.
Sean,
Yeah.
underrated wise. I still don't think people appreciate Jaden Thomas. And part of it's because of he's not real fast, but how bad he looked in the first couple games last year. I mean,
You were so upset at the end of that Marshall game.
he was bad. he didn't deserve to play after that, is the way I looked at it. I mean, I wouldn't have played him the next week,
They
unless he
stuck
just
with
was
him,
like,
though.
hey, coach, I screwed up. That's on me.
Yeah.
But by the end of the year, he was their best receiver. And you
Yeah.
got props to the kid for that, man, because he could have quit. I mean, he could have gotten his head and got on his feelings, and people are ripping me and they're getting on me and all this, and he just kept working, man. And you need to have that kind of. I don't care what anybody else says. I don't care if I had a bad game. Meaning, I'm not going to doubt myself. I'm going to work hard, make sure I don't do it again. And that's what Jaden did.
Yeah.
And to me, I think he's still very underrated. And I think the next most underrated guy he's not there yet because he's not on campus, but it'll end up being the younger Caleb Smith. Because I still don't think fans appreciate how good that kid is. He's going to be really, really good.
Yeah,
really
he's a sleeper, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, all of a sudden he pops on the field and you're like, oh, I forgot about him.
The older Caleb Smith, where does he fit in from a talent perspective? He's not going to play this year because he's the most talented guy. I'll just say that. He's going to play this year because he's savvy, he's skilled, he knows how to play, he works. But, I mean, he's bottom 2 or 3 from a pure talent standpoint. Him and Jaden Thomas are both near the bottom from just a pure God-given, speed, explosiveness, all that. They're just really good receivers. They're just really good football players. But so if we're just talking talent, they're near him and Jaden Thomas of the scholarship players. I'd say Jaden Thomas and Caleb Smith are probably at the bottom of the list in just pure talent.
Yeah.
But that's what I love that's what I loved about coaching receivers, Sean, because you didn't have to be an elite athlete to be an elite receiver.
No.
You have to be a really good athlete to be a great corner. I mean, you just have to.
Yeah.
And have you ever seen the study on corners in recent years that ran 4.6 or slower in the combine? Like, they just can't play in the NFL. You can be. There's 4.6 guys that are catching 100 balls a year in the NFL.
Yeah.
Borderline 4.6 or 4.6. I mean, Cooper Kupp was in the 4.5s. Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, Michael Thomas from Ohio State. They were all like mid to high 4.5 guys that are just killing in the NFL. You get that kind of speed at cornerback like Julian Love, and they move you to safety. You can't, because you can't play corner at that speed.
No.
And that's what I love about receivers. You got to be skilled. Like for example, Justin Jefferson. Yes, he's a very good athlete, but Justin Jefferson is not what he is because he's a great athlete. He's what he is because, yes, he's a great athlete, but he's incredibly skilled. Devontae Adams is not what he is because he's an elite athlete. He's a very good athlete, not elite, but he's incredibly skilled. Cooper Kupp is a very underrated athlete for obvious reasons, but he's incredibly skilled. He's not who he is because of his athleticism alone. It's because he's incredibly skilled.
Right.
Jerry Rice, incredibly skilled. Right? Jerry Rice never had Alvin Harper's God-given physical tools. Right? Michael Irvin didn't have Alvin Harper's God-given tools, but he was a way better receiver because he was skilled. And that's one of my favorite things about coaching. Was one of my favorite things about coaching receivers is you could get a guy that maybe wasn't an elite athlete that could be a really good receiver if he took his craft really seriously.
Yeah.
That's how I
that for me is the amazing thing about the comment Sam Hartman made and the comment that Caleb Smith made when they both met with the media as transfers.
Mm-hmm.
So Caleb Smith was like, yo, Tobias Merriweather?
Right.
Right.
He said that on your show, right, Sean?
Yeah. And then Sam Hartman, like, yo, Tyler is like, so this whole thing that Notre Dame doesn't have talent, look, don't take it from us.
Right.
Listen to the players that are coming from other places that have seen the talent at their places and are walking in saying, yo, he's different.
Right. Yeah, we shall see. Kuba Puig also says Rico Flores will be the best underneath receiver. Book it.
Okay.
Maybe. I could see it. I could also see Caleb Smith being that because a lot of what Caleb Smith is going to do is crossers and stuff like that. I think where I could say is I could see Rico making that case for the best intermediate guy. You know what I mean? But underneath guys usually to me are those guys who are doing a lot more of the crossers, the speed stuff.
Yeah.
It's that intermediate zone that I could see that at. But hey, look, but that's what's so good about this, right? Or Sean, is we could debate this stuff. There's not a I think it's Tobias and Braylon. You make the case for Lorenzo. Other people are going to make the case for Deion Colsey. Some people are going to make the case for Rico. Some people are going to make, and who's the best route runner? Ryan and I have debated this. Rico or Jaden Greathouse, Tobias Merriweather's under, and that's where you want to be, is you want to have some debate about who the best guy is and who's the best at this and who's the best at that, because that means more often than not, you're going to be in a situation where you've got multiple guys with the potential to be that. And that's ultimately where you want it to be. That's ultimately where you want it to be. USMA asks, last year's spring game was a draft. How would you prefer they determine lineups for the game? I personally, and this is the coach in me talking, I would prefer that they would say, okay, we're going to put certain units together. I want this line working together. I want this receiver group working together. I want this running back, not running back as much. I want this linebacker tandem working together. I want to see this, and I would pair it up like that, try to get it as even as possible. But I would, and if you wanted to do a draft, I said this yesterday, I would put those groups together and then let the quarterbacks draft their teams or something like that, or whatever. I would say, hey, this is the group of, you can choose this offensive line group or that offensive line group. You can choose this receiver group or that receiver group. And I'd go about it that way. Because I feel like that gives you the best chance to get the game the game action that you need with those groups. If, that's just me, but that's the coach in me. I get why you're doing it for the players. It's for the players, why you have the draft. I also don't love the draft, because then you start getting the guys that get picked late. I've never liked that for that reason. Like, the last kid picked on the playground kind of thing. So those are the things that I look at it for that one, Sean. All right, here we got a question here, Sean, that I passed this question because I knew you'd want to help answer this question. It's from Gavin Harden.
If you have to pick a running back to build a team around today between Dickerson, Barry Sanders, LT, and Marshall Faulk, who are you taking?
For a second there, I was like, why are you asking me about Lawrence Taylor? And then I remember LaDainian Thompson. For me personally, the best back of that group is Barry Sanders. I mean, there's no doubt. But for the type of offense that I run, it'd be Marshall Faulk, because I really like to throw the ball to the running back down the field. I really like to be able to do that. And Barry was a guy that could do stuff in the screen game, but he wasn't a guy you were throwing really a ton of stuff down the field to. So just for my particular, because here's the deal, Sean. If I'm running a team, I'll take any one of those guys. They're all Hall of Famers.
Right.
So you're splitting hairs. So then you get into, well, this is the system that I run. Now, if Barry Sanders was my running back, would I tailor my system to him? You bet your darn booty I would. But I'm saying, but with Marshall, I don't have to.
No.
And then next after him would be LT, because I don't have to tailor my system to fit what he does. That's what he brings to the table. Dickerson and Barry Sanders are more pure runners for me. And so that's why I would go with Marshall 1, LT 2, but then also say, if we're taking out who I would pick to run my team, who's the best back? My life, Barry Sanders is the best running back I've ever seen. I was a little too young to truly, because I saw Walter Payton play when he was older and he was still good, but I didn't see the 70s version of Walter Payton. So
man,
so of what I have seen,
you missed the treat.
And I've seen highlights and all that, but but it's like I've seen highlights of Jim Brown. I can't stack Jim Brown up against these other backs because I never saw him play. Of the backs that I have seen, Barry Sanders is the best running back I've ever seen, and it's not really debatable for me.
Yeah,
just for me. But picking a team to run my system, it'd be Marshall Faulk.
I would think that going back to what I said, loving to be able to dictate to the defense, it would have to be between LT and Marshall Faulk. Yeah. And I probably would lean more to Marshall Faulk. Even though LT was incredible out of the backfield as well, I don't think he was the type as effective, like splitting him out in the slot or splitting him out and running routes. He wasn't as proficient in route running as Marshall Faulk. So even though he catch the ball, Marshall Faulk all around. For today's game, I would probably go with him.
Got a super chat down here from Trevor Rocket. Thank you, Trevor.
Greetings from Drayton, Ontario, Canada. Lads, just wanted to thank all of you guys involved in this podcast. It's greatly appreciated. Keep up the great work and respect to the IB crew and nation.
Appreciate that, Trevor.
Thank you, Trevor.
Very, 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 very much. I have a basketball question down here from AJ Irish AJ Sean. Let me read this one because you're more of the basketball guy. The Golden State Warriors used to have a death lineup in 2006. Death lineup in 2016. Was that one of the KD teams?
No.
Was he there in 16? So that was pre-KD? Okay.
Pre-KD.
What is the collection of skill players you'd try to get on the field at the same time to have Notre Dame version of that? I mean, there isn't one. I mean, Steph Curry is one of the best to ever do what he does. I mean, probably the best three-point shooter ever, would you say, Sean? Volume plus accuracy?
I understand what he's saying. I would probably say, because you're basically talking about speed and height mixture, even though their depth lineup was small because Draymond was playing the center position. Probably just from the standpoint of getting your best, most explosive players on the field would be Tyree on the field somehow, some way, with let's say
Tobias and Dion on the outside.
Tobias and Dion on the outside.
Yeah.
And
that's a more dynamic version of what you had in 2018.
Yeah.
With a much better quarterback.
Yeah.
I mean, right? You had Miles and Chase outside and Chris Fink in the slot.
Now, this might, some people might not understand what I'm saying. In order for it to be the death lineup, you would have to have Tyler on the field at quarterback rather than Sam Hartman. Because
state your case.
No, because see, their lineup was all about being able to beat you so many different ways. Like they were great defensively, but then they could come down, they could drive and kick, they can get points in the paint, they could kill you from three. I think that offense, you're more explosive. You're explosive in the passing game and more explosive in the running game.
So you're looking at it from the standpoint of, since Curry could create on his own, or school be okay. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it's just a matter of just adding another dimension.
In 23, I still say it's Hartman because he can get the ball where it needs to get to accurately, more accurately. But I'm good if Tyler Buckner ends up being the quarterback this year. I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm good. That's an interesting conversation. All right, let's get to some more, Sean. We have a lot of great questions here. Want to get to a few more before we have to get out of here. We got to that one. Let's see here. Let me get to a few more. Here we go. All right, here we go. Here's one from We Are Not Marshall. This is a good one.
This is the first time, Brian Sean, this is the first time, regardless of who the quarterback is headed into the season, that I am not afraid of having to play from behind because of the explosiveness that this group presents. I think it is a very this is my feeling. And I want to get your, because I messed with Malik the other day on this. It is one of the most comfortable situations to walk in offensively for any quarterback. Like if you sat back and let's say you had the offensive players at North Carolina, the offensive players at USC, and the offensive players at Notre Dame. Who do you think those quarterbacks would choose to play behind and with?
Who the Notre Dame quarterbacks would want to play behind?
No. Of all the quarterbacks, just had with no allegiance, they were just looking at the offensive talent, line, running backs, wide receivers. Like
I know who I'd want to play behind. I think that some people might pick USC from a perception standpoint. But I'm not trading Notre Dame's kids. This is what look. You can call me a homer, bias, whatever you want. But if you're the teams that you mentioned, I'm not trading. The only team that I would consider trading my offensive skill talent for is Ohio State. That's it.
And that's probably their offensive line just lost.
That's why I said very clearly, right? Skilled players.
Yeah.
The only group.
The wide receivers and maybe the running backs. Yeah.
The running backs, for me, if they're healthy, that's one of the 2 or 3 best running back rooms in college football. If they're healthy.
If they're healthy.
And their receiving core is loaded. Cade Stover's he's a good complementary player at tight end.
Yeah.
That's the only one. but Notre Dame's offensive line by a mile over Ohio State's.
Yeah.
And so, but like USC's skill talent is a little overrated for me. It's good. It won't be as good this year as it was last year. With all due respect to the kid from Arizona,
Well,
he's not as
they're
good as
really
Jordan Addison.
they're really young. They're really
They're
young.
yes, and their offensive line is not going to be that. It
Still
was
not there.
okay last year because it
Yeah.
was very veteran. It's not going to be as good this year. They won 11 games because of two words: Caleb Williams. Right? I mean, from a player standpoint, I mean,
Yeah.
Caleb Williams put that team on his shoulders. If you go
Yeah.
back and really study the Notre Dame game, even with some of the dumb play calling and scheme stuff that they made, they needed times where Caleb just did stupid stuff that nobody else can do to win that game. I mean, just flat out. Now it's with Notre Dame not playing a good game plan. And so to me, you're there. But to his point, Sean, this absolutely but it's not about the quarterback.
No.
Right? And that's the point he's making is, but the quarterback is needed.
Yeah.
Because what I would say is, I get the question's not about the quarterback. Am I reading this correctly? It's regardless who the quarterback is.
Yeah.
So that can be taken two ways. One is the skill talent around him is great, or the other way to take it is because I have faith in multiple quarterbacks.
And both quarterbacks, yes.
Now, based on his anti-Tyler Buckner history, I think we're talking about the skill players. And that would be my guess. But from either perspective, I think it's true that you've got multiple quarterbacks and go win you games, but the skill talent and the line play and everything that's around them, you can fall behind 14-0 and you'll be all right.
Yeah.
Perfect example. You remember what the score was early in the second quarter of the 2016 national title game? It was Alabama 14, Clemson nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And Clemson didn't get out of their game plan because they knew, hey, we're good. Right. And then they come back. Deion Kane catches a screen pass.
Yeah.
Makes dudes miss, runs 50 yards, and they end up going. And now it's 14-7 ball game. They were fine. Hey, we're good. We're good. They had the quarterback, but then they had the skill. They had Mike Williams. They had Artavis Scott. They had Deion Kane. They had Wayne Gallman. They had Jordan Leggett at tight end. They were good. We're fine. Don't panic. And to his point, I agree with that too. You got behind USC last year. You started to panic a little bit because you're like, I don't know if we can win a shootout in this game. I don't want to have to play a lot of shootouts, but I have a lot more faith that Notre Dame can win one now than I did ever, like since 2015. The most confidence I've had in Notre Dame's ability to win a shootout since 2015.
Yeah.
So no doubt.
Because you feel confident. Last year you knew we had to be able to run the ball.
Mm-hmm.
We had to be able to run the ball. This year, heck, we want to go 3-4 wide and just light your tail up. We can do that.
Right.
Give us 4 plays. We can be down the field in the end zone. And you have that confidence right now. But that's why, put it out there the way. I just think Notre Dame has one of the most explosive skill groups and best offensive lines in the country. So, heck, you're right. You put a good quarterback behind this Notre Dame offense with the skilled players, you're going to do some damage.
You know who else this helps a ton, Sean, that we're not talking enough about? It is really comforting for a defense. When you have that kind of, hey guys, we struggled early. Our offense is going to get us back in this game. Just chill out. Let's go out and execute and get a stop this next series, and that's all we got to control. We don't got to go steal the ball. We don't got to make a play. Look, just make stops, and our offense is going to do what they need to do.
Yeah.
When your margin for error is as small as it was in past seasons, it was a problem.
Notre Dame defenses have been on the sideline talking to each other like, hey, man, look, if we give up more than 20,
we're in trouble.
We're in trouble.
Yeah.
We might lose this game. So you're darn right it changes the mindset. It changes the whole thermostat for the team.
Mm-hmm.
Changes when you have an explosive offense. It just, you don't. I think it did that we thought Ohio State's defense was pretty good when we came out of the Notre Dame game, right? And then we started to watch them against Penn State, and we're like, oh, Penn State found a little something.
Right.
And then we saw them against Michigan, and we're like, oh, okay.
Right.
Like they weren't as dominant as maybe we thought. And that is, because they faced offenses that had good quarterback play. Because you said, you hung in with them a little bit more than I did. The quarterback at Penn State, I thought he had a pretty decent season last year. Because I was
Sean Clifford or
Sean
Drew
Clifford.
Allen? Yeah.
Sean Clifford. I was out on him before the season started, and he actually had a
He can
pretty
win you
good
some
season.
games. He's not going to beat Michigan. He's not going to beat Ohio State.
No.
But he's going to beat Purdue. He's going to do what he needs to do in the fourth quarter to beat Purdue, and those kind of
yeah. And I just think, man, now Notre Dame is right in line with JJ McCarthy. They have a JJ McCarthy type quarterback that can impact the game, and I think he's a better He's not a better athlete and player, playmaker per se at the quarterback position. But the quarterback position is total. I'll tell you one thing. I dare Ohio State to only score 7 points through 3 quarters this year. I dare
you. They won't be in the game.
I dare
they won't be in the game. And it won't happen. I mean, they'll have more than what did they have 7?
It was 7.
Yeah, because you had that early touchdown.
No, they scored. I take that back. They scored at the did they score at the end of the third? To take
they took the lead into the third quarter.
Okay.
They took a 14-10 lead early in the third quarter.
Okay.
It was 10-7 for most of the game.
I'll tell you what, I dare Ohio State to have 7 at halftime. How about that?
Yeah.
Go to halftime with 7 points.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens this year.
Yeah. Let's get to some more. This is an interesting one, Sean. I saw this list yesterday. I just kind of had to shake my head. Here's a question from Archer.
PFF ranked the top defense. I saw this. I did see this and the OC list. Top 10 defensive coordinators as follows: Iowa, Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia, Penn State, LSU, Minnesota, North Carolina State, Ole Miss, Cincy. What do you agree with, and who would you change?
Okay, so first of all, there's no way I'm putting a guy who's been a coordinator for a year in my top 10, much less at number 2. With all due respect to Jesse Minter, all he did was do exactly what the guy before him did.
That's it.
Right? I mean, now he may end up being that guy, but he was there one. That's like the Oregon State guy did a great job last year. I'm not putting him in there because he did it for 1 year. Matt House from LSU, based on what? Did you watch LSU's defense last year?
You watched the SEC championship game?
I mean, let's pick a game. Did you watch Jordan Travis rip them up? Did you watch the Tennessee rip them up? Did you watch Texas A&M rip them up? Did you watch Bama go for 31 on them? Florida go for 35 on them? Are you kidding me? Like, what are you basing that on? It doesn't make any sense. And now, do I think he'll have a shot to be in there this year? Yeah, I think Matt House they'll get better as they learn his system more, and they'll do a good job. And it was good, but you're gonna put him in the top 10 right now, like in borderline top 5, based on what? Now, here's who Phil Parker. I was glad to see Phil Parker number 1 because Phil Parker is without question one of the best defensive coordinators in football, and very underrated guy. You want to put Jim Knowles in there for his body of work? That's fine. He'd be more towards the bottom of my list, though. The Georgia tandem of Muschamp and Glenn Schulman deserves to be in that conversation. Manny Diaz, I'm fine with. My initial reaction was say no because he was such a bad head coach. But Manny's he's been a good D coordinator. He was a good D coordinator at Miami. He did a good job at Penn State last year. So I'm fine with him being in there. Joe Rossi at Minnesota absolutely belongs in there. NC State, Tony Gibson absolutely belongs in that conversation. Pete Golding has no business being in this conversation at number 9. Are you freaking kidding me? Pete Golding doesn't belong in the top 50 of defensive coordinators. Are you kidding me with that? Are you absolutely kidding me with that? And then with all due respect to Brian Brown, what in the world is he doing on this list? They gave up 19 points a game last year against a crap schedule at Louisville. This is the same guy that 2 years ago they were giving up, or a year ago in 21, 2 years ago, meaning from 23. 21, they gave up 27 points a game, gave up 26 points a game in 2019, and gave up 33 points a game in 2019. What is he doing on this list? Because he's the new DC at Cincinnati. What in the world are those two guys doing on this list? And how are you not going to have Morgan Scalley on this list from Utah? How are you not going to have him on this list? How are you not going to have John Heacock from Iowa State on this list? Like, Iowa State was terrible last year, but they were losing games like 10-9, 14-7. Like, they had a really good defense last year. And here's another guy that belongs on this list, Sean, to me, that's a very underrated guy. Brad White at Kentucky does a really nice job with not great talent. And so those are guys to me that are not on this list that flat out should be on this list. Certainly. And if you want to go at Jesse Minter, okay, whatever. I wouldn't. I need to see him do it for another year, but whatever. Okay, fine. Put him lower in the list. But the last two guys and Matt House right now do not belong in this conversation right now, especially Pete Golding and Coach Brown from, I forget his first name. Is it Bryce? I forget what his first name is. But the Coach Bowen is what it is, isn't it? He was at Louisville. He has no business being on this list. And Pete Golding has no business being on this list. How you cannot have John Heacock in a top 10 defensive coordinator job in college football right now is just tells me you have no clue what you're doing. No clue what you're doing. Look, in the Big 12, the last 3 years, Iowa State with very, very little NFL talent. I can't get the McDonald kid, very little NFL talent. 21.4 points per game in 20.5 last year, 20.3 this past year, with a terrible, terrible off. This year, they gave up 285.6 yards per game. Iowa State did. They had number 4 defense in the country this past year. They were number 9 the year before in total defense. In the Big 12, Iowa State has been a top 10 defense the last 2 years, and you don't have their defensive coordinator in there, but you're going to put Michigan guys in there who's got a ton of NFL players running all over the place? Come on, man. You're going to have Matt House in there, but you're not going to have John Heacock in there? It's a terrible list. It's an absolutely terrible list, Sean. I will give them respect, though. Having Phil Parker number 1 is a great call. It's a great call.
Man, look, what they do at Iowa from a discipline technique standpoint is absolutely amazing. It's amazing. They had nothing last year offensively.
Yep.
Nothing had a chance to go to the Big Ten championship game. I'm talking about nothing offensively. Their quarterback situation was worse than Notre Dame's last year.
Yep.
And yet somehow, some way, that you know what I love about that? When you have a defensive coordinator, it's like, oh, this is the challenge. This is what we have to do this year. But we're not about to complain. We're going to have to win games 10-9.
That's right. And John Heacock did the same thing at Iowa State.
Absolutely.
Absolutely right.
Absolutely. That's what we're going to have to do.
In a league with better offenses. That's
Yeah.
the one. That's the only difference between those two coaches to me.
Yes.
From a number standpoint, John, is John Heacock plays in a league with better offenses, top to bottom.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Those two Iowa coaches flat out are on the list. Morgan Scalley at Utah, how's he not on this list? And look, if you wanted to put Matt House and Jesse Minter on there because you're projecting, all right, fine. But there's the last two to me are just terrible.
Morgan Scalley should be on the list just from the Pac-12 championship game.
Yeah. Yep. So that to me, man, those are just absolute no business, those two guys being on that list. And if you want to keep Jesse Minter in there and you want to have Matt House in there, fine. Put him at 9 and 10. All right. Project him to 9 and 10. But I want guys on this list, especially in the top 5, that have done it year after year after year after year. Because let's be honest about like Jim Knowles. I think Jim Knowles is a real good DC, but in the last 4 years, he's had one good defense. Ohio State was better on defense this year, but they still weren't great. Right. And so I don't know how you can have Jim Knowles over Manny Diaz right now. Joe Rossi should be up. I mean, Joe Rossi had a top 5 defense last year with very little NFL talent. Tony Gibson did a great job at NC State. So I was glad to see those guys on the list. Those guys deserve to be on the list. But some of those guys, especially Pete Golding, and I'm keep forgetting this. I'm going to look the guys. His name, he's got 2 B's on his name. Give me a second. Cincinnati 223 football team. I'm trying to remember the name of their defensive coordinator. Just give me a second here, guys and gals. It's Brian Brown. Like, to me, Doug Belk, maybe, but this past year, the Houston defense was terrible this past year. Like, they were really bad this past year. So, no, they wouldn't be on my list right now. They took a big step back this past year at Houston. So, no, you could say part of that's on the head coach and all that, but when you just gave up 32 points a game, you're not on my top 10 list. I'm sorry. You're not. And that's what Houston gave up this year, 32.2 points per game.
Mm-hmm.
A year ago, Doug Belk would have probably been on my list, but not after what they did this past year. Because here's the deal, and Doug Belk he's been their OC for DC for 3 years, right? If I remember correctly, this past year was his 3rd year. Let me just look that up and just to make sure. Yes, 21. Yeah, he was assistant DC in 20, and then 21. In 2 of the last 3 years, they've given up over 30 points a game. Like, no, he's not. He's not on that list for me. So, and just like I wouldn't have Al. I mean, to me, how's Matt House any different than Al Golden from a number standpoint? You know, there really isn't that much of a difference. Notre Dame ranked 21st this year in total defense. LSU ranked 41st in total defense. You know, Notre Dame ranked 34th in yards allowed per play, and LSU ranked 51st in total yards per play. So, you know, that's the thing is like, okay, if you're going to put him in there because you're projecting forward, then why aren't we talking about Al Golden? Right? I mean, so I just maybe he'll be there in 2023, right? If we're having this conversation for the 2024 season. But, you know, I don't see it. I don't see it with him either, at least as of right now. All right, last couple, Sean, and we got to get out of here. Here's a good one from Domer TX22.
Compare Jaden Davis's ceiling to Carr's. Of course, the best player from my hometown chooses Michigan. Gross.
I wouldn't be too worried about it. I don't get the love for Jaden Davis. I don't. He's got some tools. He's very raw. I don't see the arm strength. CJ's got a better arm. CJ's very close athletically. CJ's got a better quarterback body.
Yeah.
CJ's got better accuracy. They both make plays off platform and off script. It's not close. Jaden Davis is not a top 100 player for me, and CJ Carr's a top 20 player for me. So it's not close. He's very, very overrated. We have an Antoine, the Michigan fan in our chat, Sean, will say that. He'll tell you that. They're overrated. He's overrated. Like, he's just not that good of a player.
No.
I actually think he's a little better than Antoine thinks he is. But, you know.
Well, I think we know the next prize in Michigan is in the 25 class.
Yeah.
I think everybody knows at that position.
Yeah, Michigan needs to get Bryce Underwood because you cannot go 3 years in a row where arguably the best quarterback in the country was from your state and you don't get any of them.
You don't get them in.
They missed on Dante, they missed on CJ, and one of those kids, his grandfather won a national championship as your head coach.
Yeah,
they've got to get one of those kids. They got to get Bryce. Just take Notre Dame, just looking at it from a Michigan standpoint, they've got to get Bryce.
Yeah.
They've got to get Bryce. And could you imagine if they lose him to Michigan State? Could you imagine that if they lose him to Michigan State? Oh, goodness gracious. All right, Sean, here's the last question here. This is a fun one. We'll end on a fun one here real quick here from Josh Buffo, the motivational business banker.
Besides Jalen Smith, because he was in a world all his own, who in your opinion was the most athletic linebacker in your ND viewing history?
Oh, I mean, for me, it's Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I mean, we could talk about Courtney Watson. We could talk about Michael Stonebreaker, Demetrius DeBose, but Jeremiah Athletic was an incredible athlete. I mean, he was an absolutely incredible athlete.
Yeah.
So he'd be my next one besides Jalen. Now we could potentially be talking about Nolan Ziegler or Jalen Sneed in a couple years, or Jaden Osbury in a couple years, or Drake Bowen in a couple years. But for right now, it's Jeremiah.
Yeah,
it absolutely.
I would agree with that.
Drew Tranquill's in the conversation.
Yeah,
Drew Tranquill's actually faster than Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah.
Yeah.
Jeremiah is just more explosive in some of the other athletic movements. Drew Tranquill is one of the most underrated athletes as a linebacker that Notre Dame's ever had. Like, he was way more athletic. I remember arguing with people. They would try to tell me Tavon Coney was more athletic than Drew Tranquill. I'm like,
no.
There's only one reason you could make that argument, and it's a very, very misguided reason to make an argument. But he was always more athletic than Tavon.
Yeah.
Tavon was not a very good athlete. He just was a really instinctive football
player.
And he was physical. Yeah. But Drew was a much better athlete.
Yeah.
If we're talking top 5 of the last 20 years, Drew Tranquill's in that conversation.
Absolutely.
He's not in the conversation. He's in my top 5.
And that was after injuries.
Right.
He was still extremely athletic.
2 ACL injuries. He still ran a 4.57, had a 30-something inch vertical, great testing numbers, and we see what he's doing in the NFL.
Yeah, shout out to him. He just won himself a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
about going to Kansas City.
Oh yeah, I got you. I was like, wait a minute, what? Yeah, I got you. I got you. A preemptive Super Bowl. Yeah.
Did you see? Because you mentioned Justin Ross. Did you see? They did like a nice expose on him this week.
Oh really?
He's
I
with
didn't
the
see that. I'll have to
Chiefs.
check it out. Yeah.
He's with the Chiefs and he's back. And they said, man, he took the Chiefs kind of let him take the last year and a half to kind of
Good.
get his body
I
right.
really hope that kid comes. And I've said this before. He is the greatest argument you can make for why NIL is important for players.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he came, he did everything he needed to do. He was great for Clemson for a couple years, helped him win a championship, and then he had a devastating injury. He'll probably never make the money in the NFL he could have.
Mm-hmm.
If NIL was around when he was in college, he'd still be okay.
Yeah.
He'd still be okay. He still would have made some money.
Yep.
And he'd be in an okay shape. That right there is one of the biggest arguments I have for why it should be okay to be there. Somebody said, how's Manti Te'o not on the list? Because the question was about the
athleticism.
best athletic line. The big reason Manti didn't last as long in the NFL is because he's not a great athlete.
Right.
Right. So that's why Manti's not on the list.
Yeah.
So he doesn't belong. I mean, if we're going to talk athlete, Asmar Bilal was a better athlete than Manti was.
Man, Asmar took him a while to put it together, but
yeah. But it was never about athleticism. He just didn't have a real good feel for the game. It was never about athleticism.
Yeah.
So, again, if we're talking who are the best linebackers, Sean and I have had this debate. Who was the better college linebacker, Manti or Jalen? I think it was Manti.
Right.
Jalen was more talented, and it's not Jalen's fault that he played for Brian Van Gorder instead of Bob Diaco. He only played for Diaco for 1 year. I've said this also. If Jalen Smith would have played for Mike Elko, he'd have been one of the greatest linebackers to ever play the game in college football, ever.
Right.
Ever. And clearly the best at Notre Dame of my lifetime.
I agree.
But he didn't. He didn't play under him, and he didn't have the production, and he didn't have the career Manti had.
Yeah.
But most talented. This question was about athletic, and that's where it's not a conversation.
Yep.
I mean, Manti's not in my top 5, just pure athleticism. Not that he was a bad athlete, but he's not the athlete Jalen was. He's not the athlete Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah was. He's not the athlete that Drew Tranquil was. He's not the athlete Asmar Bilal was. He wasn't even the athlete Drew White was. Drew White had better testing numbers than Manti did. If we're just talking athleticism. So that's why. Just talking athleticism.
Yep.
Player-wise, Manti's the best linebacker Notre Dame's had in my lifetime, honestly. I still would have loved to have seen Jalen with a real defensive coordinator for 2 years, his last 2 years. That'd have been fun to watch. Really fun to watch. So, Sean, that's going to do it for today's show, man. I want to thank everybody for being with us. Sean, thank you for stepping in last minute, man, and helping us out here real quick and stepping up for Ryan, who had to go deal with his family today. I ask that y'all keep him and his family in your prayers. Definitely do that for us, please. Also, right now, the guys at IB Nation Sports Talk are getting ready to start their show right now. So switch over to the Friday hot rapid fire that the IB Nation Sports Talk guys are going. They are going to get that started here in about a minute. So hop over there. But before you leave, everybody, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Sean, I will see you, my friend, tomorrow morning. We have practice together. Yep. Drive safe tomorrow, my man.
Yes, sir.
Have a great night, everybody, and we'll join us again soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.